Chapter 438. Sword Cultivator. Chapter 438. Sword Cultivator. Su Zimo finally heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Demonis G avoid him. Internally, he felt a tinge of guilt. He had no other choice in order to hide his identity. Why, you're unwilling? Su Zimo's expression darkened. Since he was acting, he had to go all the way. Demonis G was stunned for a moment when she saw that the burly man was displeased. Instantly, she smiled with a charm that struck at one's soul and replied tenderly, "Please don't be angry, benefactor. There's been a misunderstanding and I mistook you for an old friend of mine. Let me express my apologies." With that, she bowed over with an apologetic look. Su Zimo harumphed and did not say anything more. With a flicker in her eyes, Demonis G asked again, "Are you not going to ask me who my old friend is, benefactor?" "Not interested." Su Zimo waved it off and walked into the distance at an extremely fast speed while saying from far away, "I'm only interested in the Human Emperor's palace. I want to head to the Human Emperor's palace too. Shall we go together?" Demonis G yelled from behind. There was naturally no way Su Zimo would reply as he went silent, pretending to have heard nothing. They had only met and he was nearly exposed by Demonis G. If they were to travel together, she might truly see through his disguise. "Su Zimo!" Suddenly, a shout sounded from behind without any warning at all. Instinctively, Su Zimo wanted to stop in his tracks and turn back. That was the most natural reaction for anybody. However, in a flash, he realized what was going on and continued moving ahead, disappearing from Demonis G's line of sight in the blink of an eye. When she saw that, Demonis G frowned slightly and murmured in deep thought, "Seems like it's not him." Su Zimo only slowed down after he was far away and heaved a sigh of relief. That was close. Demonis G was the one who shouted earlier on. If Su Zimo reacted slower against her sudden shout, he would have definitely revealed a flaw and would be exposed to Demonis G. "That last truly is." Muttering softly, Su Zimo shook his head and flew towards the Human Emperor's palace that was at the center of the ancient battlefield. 10 days later. The Human Emperor's palace descended slowly. As it got closer to the ground, the aura that it exuded also turned increasingly terrifying. 500 kilometers around the range of the ancient palace, all the ancient living beings and remnant beasts have shifted away, not daring to linger near it. Although countless years have passed, the remnant might of the Human Emperor was massive and could still suppress the 8 desolates while instilling fear in the demons. So, that's the Human Emperor's palace. It's truly impressive. The pressure is way too immense. Even though I'm at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment, I don't even dare to head forth. It's hard to imagine the type of pressure that one has to endure if they start fighting within the perimeter of the Human Emperor's palace's shrouded area. Hurry, look. Is that a divine dragon that's etched on that stone pillar? It looks so realistic that it seems like it's alive. The appearance of the Human Emperor's palace attracted cultivators from all over the ancient battlefield. One layer after another, everyone in that dense crowd looked up at the ancient palace that was in the middle of an electric ocean and a vortex of dark clouds with shocked expressions. Not everyone was as logical as Tangyu to be able to repress their curiosity to avoid being implicated in the bloodshed. "I'll give you guys 3 breaths worth of time to leave. Anyone who is still here after that will die." Right then, an icy voice sounded from outside the perimeter, carrying a sharp edge that could slice through everything. Everyone turned over. Behind them, a long-robed cultivator strode over with a sheathed long sword hanging casually from his waist. Twirling his long, slender fingers casually, he had a cold expression. "How do we leave this place within 3 breaths?" Many cultivators frowned. 1. Expressionlessly, the long-robed cultivator lowered his head and declared, "Who is that? He sure is arrogant." Someone could not help but sneer. 2. The long-robed cultivator remarked once more. A sharp-eyed cultivator caught sight of the sect badge hanging from the person's waist and yelled with a shocked expression, "Sword Sect. He's probably the successor of Sword Sect, Hang Qiu." A massive commotion broke out from the crowd the moment they heard the words, "Successor of Sword Sect." Right then, Hang Qiu's voice sounded once more. 3. Unknowingly, His slender fingers were already on the hilt of the sword on his waist. Gazing coldly at the crowd in front of him, he said, "You've already missed your final opportunity." Buzz! A peerless white flash shone. Nobody could describe the speed and power of that slash. The startling sword was bound to startle upon making its appearance. In that instant, all the cultivators facing Hang Qiuyu were blinded by that bedazzling sword beam and could not open their eyes. The next moment, they felt their throats turn cold as a warm, sticky liquid started spewing outside with a nauseating stench. It was fresh blood. Dozens of cultivators that stood in front of Hang Qiuyu fell at the same time. Collapsing to the ground, their throats were slit by the sword and they died, unable to rest in peace. Almost everyone who came to the vicinity of the human emperor's palace were at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment and were rather capable. However, those dozens of cultivators died on the spot without even having the chance to take out their spirit weapons. That was how terrifying the might of his single slash was. The cultivators behind him were horrified as they took out protection talismans from their storage bags and crushed them instantly. Right after, they summoned their flying swords and defensive spirit weapons such as shields and heart-protecting mirrors before calming down. Swash! By the time they were prepared and looked ahead, Hang Qiuyu had already vanished. A gentle breeze blew across. Hang Qiuyu had already charged into the crowd with his startling sword. A sword beam rose followed by a bloody flash. Some of the cultivators were cut in half with fresh blood spewing and countless nauseating internal organs flowing out. Protection talismans were nothing but paper against Hang Qiuyu's sword. Clang! A cultivator defended the startling sword with his shield, and a crisp sound echoed upon the collision. The joy in his eyes appeared for a brief moment before freezing on his face. With a dimmed gaze, his head tilted to the side as his life was cut away from him. A white scar appeared on that person's shield and it broke into two by the time it fell to the ground. A superior-grade defensive spirit weapon could not even withstand a single slash from the startling sword. Many cultivators were terrified and fled into the distance, not daring to linger. That was the terror of a sword cultivator. Although the sword reigned supreme in Tianhuang mainland, not all cultivators who could use flying swords were considered as sword cultivators. For true sword cultivators, their swords never left their hands and vice versa. Unlike flying swords, sword cultivators used long swords with hilts. Sword cultivators were particular about the sword techniques, force, intent, and focused on cultivating the Tao of the sword so as to become one with the sword, to become one with the world and in fact, to become one together with the sword and world together. In the cultivation world, it was difficult to declare that a particular lineage of cultivator, be it immortal, fiend, or Buddhist, was the strongest. The end results would only be determined in a fight. However, there was a universally recognized fact in the cultivation world. The killing power of a sword cultivator was the strongest. Furthermore, among the immortal, fiend, and Buddhist sects, the sword cultivators of Sword Sect, one of the 9 immortal sects, were the most famous. The founder of Sword Sect was the #1 sword emperor of the ancient era. Chapter 439, Gathering of the Elites. Chapter 439, Gathering of the Elites. Wielding his sword, Hang Qiuyu charged into the crowd. Everywhere he passed through, hell broke loose as fresh blood spilled along with broken limbs in a tragic scene. The battlefield was in chaos. Shrieks, screams, yells and the sound of killing were mixed together. Ta, ta, ta. From the south, a series of heavy footsteps arrived. Each time it sounded, the ground would tremble a little, as if a massive being with terrifying might was sprinting over. Many cultivators looked towards the voice. A buzz-cut cultivator headed over in huge strides. With a bare upper body, his exposed muscles shone with a bronze luster and his muscles bulged out one by one, giving off an explosive feeling of power. The person carried a gigantic iron spear on his shoulder that was pitch black and heavy. Exuding a violent aura from head to toe, his eyes burned as he laughed with a domineering aura. A bunch of reckless idiots. How dare you guys try to taint the human emperor's palace? Hurry, run. It's someone from the fiend sects. That's the fiend heir of Overlord Palace, Pang Yu. Run. Pang Yu slapped the spear on his shoulder and it bounced into the air as he shouted, "It's too late to run now." Swoosh. The iron spear tore through the air, turning into a dark ray of light as the wind howled. Following the spear, Pang Yu charged into the crowd. The cultivators that stood at the front were torn into pieces by the black spear. With a flick, the spear shattered all spirit weapons that collided with it. Kill! Pang Yu roared as he gripped the black spear single-handedly. He swept in reverse and sliced dozens of cultivators in the crowd into pieces with the strength of a massive army. Overlord Palace was the strongest body-tempering sect among the Fiend sections. Even in Tianhuang mainland, they could be ranked as one of the top threes, alongside Glass Palace and Diamond Monastery. As the Fiend heir of Overlord Palace, it was easy to imagine how strong Pang Yu was in melee combat. This was a killing feast. 8 spirit meridians shone on Pang Yu's body and spirit energy surged while his bloodline roared. Everywhere his spear passed, people were bound to die as no one could withstand its sharpness. On the other side, a purple aura arrived. It produced an unrestrained pressure as though an emperor has arrived. Hurry, run! It's Ao Yuxiao of Purple Firmament sect. The crowd in the east was also in a mess as cultivators scattered in all directions. A purple-robed cultivator stood in midair with a solemn expression. His entire body was shrouded by a billion streams of purple chi that shone with a brilliant myriad of colors. He possessed a dignified aura that looked down on the masses. Go! Waving his sleeves, Ao Yuxiao chided softly. The billion streams of purple chi that were initially surrounding him formed purple swords in midair that shone brightly as they tore the crowd into pieces like a group of purple clouds. The purple clouds swept across the skies and many cultivators fell from midair to their deaths. It was as Tang Yu had predicted. An unprecedented massacre was bound to happen in the ancient battlefield with the appearance of the human emperor's palace. The vicinity around the human emperor's palace turned into a slaughterhouse. It wasn't just Sword Sect and Purple Firmament Sect. Successors of the other 9 immortal sects appeared one after another and joined the battlefield. There was an icy cold fairy with white robes fluttering, a cultivator with lightning gaze and sped like the wind, a Dao cultivator with a Dao crown on his head and a horsetail whisk. From the Fiend sects, apart from Pang Yu of Overlord Palace, Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain sect and the Fiend heir of Illusion Fiend cult appeared as well. The Fiend heir of Zenith sect, Bai Yu, charged into the battlefield with his Zenith Saber and killed ecstatically. Previously, Bai Yu escaped from the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea using blood escape after losing to Su Zimodes. Now that he reappeared, he had already unlocked his 8th Spirit Meridian. To be fair, if he hadn't unlocked the 8th Meridian, he would have met his demise like all the cultivators here if he had come forth to take a look, let alone covet for the human emperor's palace. All the successors of the immortal and fiend sects had a tacit understanding, and avoided one another temporarily while killing the other cultivators. Under such circumstances, the only ones who had a chance of escaping were those at 8 Meridian Foundation establishment. A burly man in linen clothes with thick brows and a rough face stood at the boundaries of the chaotic battlefield, watching everything coldly. Su Zimo had already arrived. Ding! Ding! Suddenly, a long and distant bell sounded from the west, seemingly able to cleanse one's soul and was extremely sacred. As the bell rang, a bald cultivator strode over. He was barefooted and dressed in monk robes. Wielding a golden bell, his eyes shone with a tinge of golden glow. It was the successor of Diamond Monastery, Monk Ju Chen. Amitba. Monk Ju Chen held one palm vertically and let out a Buddhist proclamation with conviction. After 10 days, Monk Ju Chen's expression was normal and his aura was stable. It was clear that his injuries had already healed. Su Zimo nodded silently. As one of the 6 Buddhist monasteries, Diamond Monastery was truly capable. Previously, Monk Ju Chen's was heavily suppressed by Su Zimo and his flesh had exploded while his organs were dislocated. In 10 days, he had already recovered to his original state. That was proof that the monk's physique was truly extraordinary. Ding! Expressionlessly, Monk Ju Chen flicked his wrist gently and the bell sounded once more. A group of cultivators that were fleeing in midair on their flying swords shuddered. Their faces turned pale as they swayed unsteadily. Ding! The bell sounded once more. Thud! Thud! One after another, the cultivators fell from midair. By the time they reached the ground, their gazes were dim and blood flowed from all 7 orifices. They were already dead. 3 more monks and a nun strode slowly forward behind Monk Ju Chen. Although the 3 monks and the nun were all Buddhists as well, Their attires were different as were the sect badges on their waists. Among the 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 successors had appeared. It was a gathering of the elites. In this battle, some cultivators from other sects or itinerant cultivators who thought that they were strong finally understood the terror of the immortal, fiend and Buddhist sections. Although they were also at 8 Meridian Foundation establishment, they were no match for the successors of those sects. The number of cultivators around the human emperor's palace decreased, but the number of corpses increased as blood flowed like a river. Finally, someone caught sight of Su Zimo, who was standing at the boundaries. It was Bai Yu, the fiend heir of Zenith sect. Naturally, he did not know that this was Su Zimo who had changed his appearance. Otherwise, he wouldn't have advanced alone without any reservations. Bai Yu's expression was cold as he held the bloody Zenith saber in his hands. He glared at Su Zimo without any shred of emotion. Although Su Zimo was expressionless, a flicker of mockery flashed through his eyes. Die! Bai Yu swung his Zenith saber and created a bloodied arc in midair before it descended upon Su Zimo's head. Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly. Just as he was about to take action, a tender shout sounded from behind him. Stop! A fragrance wafted over. A pink ribbon tore through the air. Although it looked weak, it managed to fend off Bai Yu's attack. Right after, as if it was alive, the pink ribbon coiled itself along the body of the saber. Frowning, Bai Yu retracted his Zenith saber hurriedly. Demoness Ji, what are you doing? He glared at the girl in pink that darted out from behind the burly man, asking in an unfriendly manner. Hee hee. By now, Demoness Ji had already covered herself with her veil again. Smiling gently, she glanced at Su Zimo and said, This is a friend I invited. He's on the side of the fiend section. Chapter 440. Commencement of the Battle. Chapter 440. Commencement of the Battle. When he heard that, Su Zimo frowned. Just as he was about to retort, Demoness Ji tiptoed beside his ear and whispered, The human emperor's palace has just descended and everyone's aiming for the throne. The successors of the immortal, fiend and Buddhist sects will tacitly eliminate the other cultivators first. If you're alone, you'll definitely be targeted. How about following the fiend sects first? It'll only benefit you. In reality, Su Zimo had 2 reasons for coming here. On the one hand, it was for the human emperor's palace. On the other hand, he wanted to test out the elites and paragons of the super sects. He had no fear of being targeted at all. However, Demoness Ji was leaning towards his ear flirtatiously. Her tender voice and scent of a maiden stirred Su Zimo's heart and he did not reject her, as if possessed. Right after, Su Zimo snapped out of his daze in a shock and lamented internally, Impressive. Demoness Ji's charm was everywhere and it was impossible to guard against her. As the pure maiden of the fiend sects, there was no need for her to cast a bewitchment technique specifically. Her presence alone was a form of bewitchment. The higher the cultivation realm of the pure maiden, the more terrifying their power of bewitchment would be. In the end, a single smile, wink and emotion would be enough to intoxicate anyone to a point of no return. In the cultivation world, there were some charming techniques that relied on wearing half-covered clothes, using flirtatious gazes, language and daring actions to seduce men. However, compared to the pure maiden sutra, those charming techniques were wildly inferior. By the end of every day, the pure maiden of the fiend sex was a peerless beauty that could overthrow the entire world. Pure, clean, awe-inspiring and inviolable, a single subtle flirtatious look from her eyes would be enough for an ancient mighty figure to submit to her whims. Humph! Sizing Su Zimo from head to toe, Bai Yu sneered, It's just a lover that you've found. What rights does he have to be compared to us fiend heirs? Hee hee. Demoness Ji chuckled. How arrogant. I wonder who were the ones who were beaten to a pulp by a friend that I randomly found back then in that underground area. Upon hearing that, Bai Yu's expression darkened and a few other fiend heirs looked terrible as well. That was a humiliation for them that no one was willing to speak of. Pang Yu swung his black iron spear and turned around after killing the last few cultivators, striding over in huge steps. The tip of the spear fell naturally to the ground and sparks flew everywhere as it trawled the ground. Where's that scholar? Arriving in front of Demoness Ji, he asked loudly with a fiery battle intent in his eyes. The scholar that Pang Yu was referring to was naturally Su Zimo. Pouting her lips, Demoness Ji rolled her eyes. How should I know? Suddenly Bai Yu said, he came to the ancient battlefield too. I've seen him. Oh! When the few fiend heirs heard that, their expressions changed and killing intent flashed through their eyes. Pausing for a moment, Bai Yu shook his head again. However, I don't think he's here. I didn't spot any signs of him. Bai Yu was thoroughly humiliated after retreating with a loss after the battle at Saber Mountain Spirit Sea, and there was naturally no way he would take the initiative to mention that. The illusion fiend cult heir harumphed coldly. That scholar has got some brains. If he dares show himself, I'll definitely create a bloody hole in his body using my iron spear. Pang Yu's expression was haughty as he slammed the iron spear in his hand onto the ground heavily. Instantly, a series of cracks appeared and his murderous aura was daunting. Su Zimo's expression was calm and there were no ripples in his eyes. Shifting his gaze, Pang Yu sized up Su Zimo and nodded while smiling. Not bad, you've got some guts. I'll forcibly acknowledge you of being qualified to stand shoulder to shoulder with us fiend heirs. Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain Sect remarked casually, since Xueqi of Malevolent Earth Sect isn't here yet, we'll let this person replace him for now as a helper. Waving his folding fan lightly, Shangguan Yu looked cool and suave. Despite the fact that he had just killed more than 100 cultivators, his clothes and hair were still neat. Hey, what's your name? Pang Yu looked at Su Zimo with a slightly raised head. Mad Blade, Su Zimo replied. Mad Blade, haha. Pang Yu laughed. You're quite arrogant. I wonder how your saber techniques are like. Bai Yu remarked coldly, in the cultivation world, most people with such loud titles are only so in terms of capabilities. You can try meal. Su Zimo said indifferently. Do you have a death wish? Bai Yu's expression changed as killing intent rose in his heart. You're wild. Interesting. Sweeping his iron spear, Pang Yu blocked Bai Yu and shook his head with a stern expression. Don't fight first. Something isn't right. Everyone followed Pang Yu's gaze. The battlefield was mostly cleaned up and the only people left under the cover of the human emperor's palace were the successors of the immortal, fiend and Buddhist sections. Among them, successors from 7 of the 9 immortal sects were present, including Hang Qiu of Sword Sect and Ao Yuxiao of Purple Firmament Sect. Of the 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 successors were present. Apart from monk Ju Chen of Diamond Monastery, there were monks from Hollow Monastery, Formless Monastery, Wisdom Monastery and a nun from Clear Heart Nunnery. Of the 7 fiend sects, Xueqi of Malevolent Earth Sect was already dead and there was no signs of the 1,000-faced assassin from Hidden Death Sect. Apart from Su Zimo, the other 4 fiend heirs and the demoness were present. These nearly 20 cultivators could be considered as the top paragons of the Foundation establishment realm in the entire Tianhuang mainland. Apart from Su Zimo, the rest of the cultivators were at 8 Meridian Foundation establishment. The reason why something felt amiss was because the 7 paragons of the immortal sects led by Hang Qiu of Sword Sect and Ao Yuxiao of Purple Firmament Sect as well as the 4 monks and 1 nun seemed to be joining forces as they surrounded the fiend heirs. Hang Qiu, Ao Yuxiao, Ju Chen. What's the meaning of this? Narrowing his gaze, Pang Yu asked slowly. Nothing much. Hang Qiu's lips curled up and he swayed his slender fingers. After destroying the fiend sects, we'll naturally choose someone from the immortal and Buddhist sects to take on the human emperor's palace's inheritance. The fiend heirs frowned. Including Su Zimo, there were only 6 of them. However, there were a total of 12 people when the paragons of the immortal and Buddhist sects were added together. In other words, each of them had to face at least 2 paragons. Pang Yu of Overlord Palace was publicly acknowledged as the strongest among the fiend heirs. However, he would not dare to claim victory against Hang Qiu, Ao Yuxiao and Ju Chen, let alone if he had to deal with 2 people at one go. Demoness Ji raised her voice. The situation is clear right now with 3 distinct lineages and a total of 18 cultivators. We can just fight in pairs to decide the final victor to obtain the human emperor's palace's inheritance. That will be considered as fairness. Monk Ju Chen's gaze swept past Su Zimo and paused for a brief moment before landing on Demoness Ji's face as he sneered. The situation will be even clearer after destroying the fiend sections. Fair. Ao Yuxiao shook his head. There's no fairness to speak of in front of the human emperor's palace. Furthermore, fiends are evil beings that should be punished. Su Zimo, if you see that the situation is not right, don't be stubborn and leave this place quickly. Suddenly, Demoness G extended her finger and poked Su Zimo's waist, whispering to him. Chapter 441. Start of the Nightmare. Chapter 441. Start of the Nightmare. I was exposed. Although Su Zimo was expressionless on the surface, he was internally shocked. Don't deny it. It's definitely you. Demoness G inched over and whispered. You can't hide it from me. My instincts have always been keen. I don't know what you're talking about. Su Zimo replied indifferently before shifting his gaze towards the dozen or so figures standing at the outer perimeter of the human emperor's palace. All of those cultivators were white-haired and old. Although their eyes were turbid and they seemed like they were at the end of their lives, there were still terrifying auras being exuded from them. They were sealers. Demoness G commented, Don't worry, the sealers won't dare to strike given the circumstances. With the immortal, fiend and Buddhist sects at a stalemate, as long as one of the factions strike and make use of their golden core powers, the sealers from the other two factions would also be implicated. By then, all parties would suffer great losses and perish. The 12 cultivators of the immortal and Buddhist sects walked over slowly in 2 rows, keeping their eyes on the 6 people on the side of the fiend sects, Su Zimo included. Hang Qiu of Sword Sect targeted Pang Yu of Overlord Palace right away. Ao Yuxiao of Purple Firmament Sect targeted the Fiend Heir of Illusion Fiend Cult as well. It was a battle between the strong. The successor of Snowdrift Valley of the Immortal Sects was a cold woman in white robes. She controlled a silver needle with a frosty aura and specialized in penetrating protection talismans and inner armors. The Nun of Clear Heart Nunnery wielded a long sword that shimmered coldly. The 2 female cultivators of the Immortal and Buddhist sects set their sights on Demoness G right away. Seems like I'll have to take care of that unknown person then. The successor of Heavenly Dipper sect smiled faintly. With a wave of his sleeves, a flying sword that shimmered with 5 spirit lights tore through the air and headed straight for Su Zimo's head. Sweeping his head, Su Zimo nodded to himself. It was as expected of the top super sects of Tianhuang mainland. With powerful foundations, most of their paragons were in possession of perfect spirit weapons. Su Zimo was not flustered at all as he brushed past his storage bag, causing a saber to appear in his palms. Clang! His saber trembled and shone with 4 spirit patterns. It was a supreme-grade spirit saber that he had found in the Elixir Pool sect ruins. Since he wanted to hide his identity, there was naturally no way Su Zimo would take out a weapon as signature as his blood quencher. Otherwise, he would be exposed by Demoness G and by you immediately. Although he could not make use of blood quencher, Su Zimo had no intention of concealing the 5 stances of the Sea Calming Manual. The reason for that was because he knew that apart from him, there was another successor who knew of those 5 stances in the cultivation world. Shoo! The flying sword tore through the air and shone with 5 spirit lights. Like a blazing sun that was filled with astral chi, it had an intimidating aura and arrived in an instant. Su Zimo's expression did not change as the spirit energy in his body surged wildly, causing 7 spirit meridians to shine underneath his robes. Ha, so you're a piece of trash. When Bai Yu swept his gaze and caught sight of that, he could not help but sneer. The other fiend heirs let out disappointed expressions as well. On the other hand, the paragons of the Immortal and Buddhist sects looked relaxed. 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators were considered as rare geniuses in the cultivation world, and in the Great Zhou dynasty, they were even rarer. However, for the many paragons present, 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators were equivalent to trash that wouldn't be able to last for more than 10 breaths in a massive fight as such. Even for cultivators of other sects that were also at 8 Meridian Foundation establishment, they were far weaker than the successors of super sects, let alone 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. The fiend heirs were already frustrated given the fact that they were in dire straits. When they saw this, they were even more upset. Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain sect opened his folding fan and defended against 2 incoming flying swords while sneering, Demoness G, your judgment is truly getting worse. Among the paragons present, only 2 of them did not show any contempt. One of them was Demonis Ji and the other was Monk Ju Chen, who had suffered a loss in the hands of Su Zimo previously. Clang! An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing echoed in the void. Sparks flew as Su Zimo swung his supreme-grade spirit saber against the incoming flying sword. Instantly, the astral chi on the sword was shattered by an immense force and dissipated on the spot. Buzz! The sword quivered unsteadily, showing signs of falling. The expressions of a few Paragons changed when they saw this. Something isn't right. Such burst power. Watch out, that man's a body-tempered cultivator. Swash! Su Zimo had already vanished from the spot, and within a couple of steps, he arrived in front of the successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect. His eyes shone brightly with a surging killing intent as he slammed down with his saber. The blade cut through the void at an extremely fast speed, and it was so forceful that heat was emitting from the saber. So fast! The successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect realized that the situation was bad, and his hair stood on ends as his pupils constricted. He was too careless. With that moment of carelessness, he had lost the initiative and was now the disadvantaged party who was in danger. Swoosh! Slapping his storage bag, he swiftly pulled out a dark gold shield and injected spirit energy into it, lifting it above his head as it expanded. Clang! Another loud boom sounded when the saber clashed against the shield. Ugh! The light on the shield dimmed, as if the spirit light was severed by Su Zimo's saber. With a dull grunt, the successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect almost knelt onto the ground. As he lifted his shield with one arm, the successor gripped his other hand into a fist that was surrounded by astral chi. He threw a punch at Su Zimo's chest like a long spear. This was the successor of one of the 9 immortal sects, Heavenly Dipper Sect, no matter what. That was why he was still able to retaliate despite his current circumstances. Don't! Suddenly, Monk Ju Chen's voice sounded. However, it was too late. Su Zimo's eyes flickered with mockery when he saw the successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect throw out a punch as he did the same and receive the incoming punch with a punch of his own. Bang! The two fists collided. The astral wind ruptured and the tide surged. Instantly, color drained from the successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect's face as bead-like sweat droplets started flowing down from his head. Crack! 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 A jarring sound of bones cracking echoed out. A few Paragons turned towards the sound instinctively and their expressions changed. The successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect's palm had already disappeared, turning into meat sludge that hung off his wrist. His entire arm was contorted into a weird shape with his bones protruding out of his flesh as it hung limply. With the meat hanging on his bones, it was a terrifying sight. Ah! The successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect howled in pain as he collapsed to the ground, shivering with a fearful expression. With 2 slashes and a punch, the successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect was crippled. The Paragons present were not the only ones shocked. Even the sealers that were watching were slightly agitated. In a fight between lions, one has to use their full strength. Since he underestimated his opponent, he has no one but himself to blame for landing in such a state. Was it truly just because he underestimated his opponent? Instantly, the tides on the battlefield had changed. Nobody expected that the successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect would land in a tragic state with a crippled arm after a single exchange of blows. This meant that a Paragon had already lost the rights to fight for the human emperor's inheritance and had to withdraw. The Paragons present looked at the successor of Heavenly Dipper Sect with a pitiable expression. Up till this point, the Paragons had not realized that a nightmare that would continue to haunt them for many years to come had just begun. Compared to some of the others present, the fate of Heavenly Dipper Sect's successor was considered lucky. Chapter 442. How dare you provoke me again? Chapter 442. How dare you provoke me again? What's this Mad Blade's background? He's got some skills. Pang Yu roared in laughter as he swept his spear horizontally, forcing Hang Qiuyu, who was coming at him, to retreat with a thrust. Compared to malevolent Earth Sect's spear techniques, Pang Yu's spear technique was much less complex. It was just a simple thrust from the middle level. However, its momentum was oppressive and the spear's ferociousness was shot forth completely. He was not disadvantaged even against 2 opponents. Sword Sect's Hang Qiuyu's sword technique was not weak at all and his sword chi was extremely sharp, possessing both offense and defense. Colliding continuously against Pang Yu's gigantic spear, the sound of metal clanging rang repeatedly as sparks flew endlessly. On the side of the fiend's sex, apart from Pang Yu who could hold his ground in a 1 versus 2, the other fiend heirs were completely disadvantaged. 4 Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain sect and Demoness Ji of Pure Maiden sect who were weaker in combat strength to begin with, they were in a perilous situation and were completely suppressed, forced to retreat continuously. On the other side, the Fiend Heir of Illusion Fiend Cult might not necessarily win Ao Yuxiao of Purple Firmament sect in a 1-on-1 fight. Now that the successor of Clear Wind Temple was assisting Ao Yuxiao, the Fiend Heir of Illusion Fiend Cult was at a loss and the situation was not looking good for him. If this battle continued, the few Fiend Heirs were bound to lose. On the battlefield, the only variable was the burly man in linen clothes with an unknown background, known to everyone as Mad Blade. Ding! After crippling Heavenly Dipper Sect's successor with 2 slashes and a punch, Su Zimo heard a piercing ring of a bell beside him. The bell rang for a long time and was never ending, like a sharp thorn that pierced his head repeatedly. With a golden bell in hand, Monk Ju Chen had already arrived behind Su Zimo. That was a spirit weapon of the Buddhist sects, the Golden Bell. Its body was a bell made of purple gold copper and its mouth was circular with rounded edges. Exquisite patterns were engraved all over its body. The golden bell in Monk Ju Chen's hand was nourished by the Buddhist light in Diamond Monastery. Day and night, it listened to the chanting of scriptures by monks and it possessed an inexplicably noble power. It had the strongest impact on those who had evil thoughts and came from heretical doctrines. Cultivators that were weaker would die on the spot, bleeding from all orifices. When Monk Ju Chen arrived here, he killed dozens of 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators with just the ringing sound of the golden bell alone. That was proof of how terrifying its might was. However, it was a pity that although the bell was powerful, its impact was almost negligible for Su Zimo who had cleared all 7 orifices. Swoosh! An evil gust of wind blew behind him. Wielding his diamond staff, Monk Ju Chen stabbed at Su Zimo's head with astounding strength. Clang! Su Zimo did not even turn back and made a backhand slash, as though he had eyes behind his back. Clashing heavily against the diamond staff, a loud sound was heard as sparks flew everywhere. One side was a reactionary counterattack while the other side was a preemptive strike. However, Su Zimo did not yield. Yet, Monk Ju Chen was forced to retreat half a step back. How strong! That person's physique is actually comparable to the successor of Diamond Monastery. The Paragons were astounded upon seeing this. Initially, when Su Zimo crippled Heavenly Dipper Sect's successor, everyone thought that it was merely because the latter underestimated his opponent and was caught unaware. But now that Su Zimo was not disadvantaged after a head-on clash with Monk Ju Chen, the Paragons of the Immortal and Buddhist sects frowned and their expressions gradually turned grim. They did not know that at the moment, Monk Ju Chen was even more shocked. His diamond staff, a perfect spirit weapon of the Buddhist sects as well, was stronger than the golden bell. The diamond staff, also known as the treasure staff or demon vanquishing staff, was one of the unique weapons of Diamond Monastery. It symbolized invincibility and unyielding dominance that was capable of suppressing all evil. Initially, Monk Ju Chen thought that he could suppress Su Zimo confidently by relying on those 2 spirit weapons. However, even with those 2 spirit weapons, he did not gain any advantage. Instead, he was the one disadvantaged right now. Hee hee. Turning around, Su Zimo grinned and said, "Monk, after I spared your life the previous time, how dare you provoke me again?" Boom! Su Zimo stomped his feet and the ground and mountains shook. With a bang, he burst forward and appeared in front of Monk Ju Chen in the blink of an eye. Circulating his bloodline, he swung his arms and cut down with his saber, as if he wanted to rip the void apart. Develop a mind that abides nowhere. Monk Ju Chen chanted his Buddhist scriptures as his diamond heart burst forth with the power of bloodline. Instantly, his figure expanded along with his aura. Roar! From the depths of Monk Ju Chen's mouth came a furious roar that sounded like a mythical lion and was able to shock one's mind. 2 bedazzling golden beams shot out from his eyes like a descending vajra with a terrifying might. It was as though Monk Ju Chen's body had disappeared and in his place stood a mighty lion with golden fur that roared into the sky fearlessly. Even Shangguan Yu and the others who were watching from the perimeter of the battlefield were shocked. let alone Su Zimo, who was facing the impact directly. Many secret skills of the Buddhist sects were truly effective at countering the fiend's sections. However, it was a pity that monk Ju Chen was facing Su Zimo. Su Zimo's cultivation basis was the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Furthermore, he had even devoured half a dragon. After meeting with Su Zimo's demonish gaze, the fearless lion developed an innate sense of fear and its aura weakened momentarily. Clang! The spirit saber collided against the diamond staff and a jarring sound of metal clashing rang. Monk Ju Chen retreated once more. Swash! Before he could catch his breath, a second strike had already descended. Su Zimo's stamina and physique was terrifying and was far beyond what monk Ju Chen could compare with. While the Diamond Sutra merely tempered one's body, the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness transformed Su Zimo entirely into an existence that was even more terrifying than pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Clang! Monk Ju Chen could only raise his diamond staff once more to defend against the second strike. By now, his arms had gone numb and no longer had any feeling as he was forced to retreat once more with a pale expression. When the successor of Hollow Monastery saw that, he charged toward Su Zimo, leaving the successor of Wisdom Monastery to fight alone with Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain Sect. Swoosh! Hollow Monastery's successor wielded an alloy steel rod which slammed down as he leaped upwards. The wind howled with a buzzing sound as though the mountains were about to be crushed into dust. Ah! Right then, a shriek sounded from the other side of the battlefield. Under the attacks of the two successors of Snowdrift Valley and Clearheart Nunnery, Demoness Ji finally failed to hold out. A gash appeared on her arm and blood gushed out. It was clear that she was already injured. The wound seemed like it was small and did not injure her bones. However, the flying swords of Snowdrift Valley possessed a 1,000-year-old frost chi that could freeze one's bloodline and spirit energy. At that moment, the chi was infiltrating Demoness Ji's body repeatedly through her wound, cruising through her limbs. Demoness Ji's movements became more sluggish and there was even a layer of frost covering her eyes and lips. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze when he saw that. At that moment, everyone from the fiend's sects, even Pang Yu of Overlord Palace, could not take care of themselves. Nobody was available to rescue Demoness Ji. Monk Ju Chen wielded his diamond staff and Hollow Monastery successor wielded his alloy steel rod. Two accomplished monks of the Buddhist sects were lunging towards Su Zimo at the same time. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he let out a long holler. He did not dodge nor retreat against the combined attacks of two paragons of the Buddhist sections. Suddenly, a series of crackling sounds came from within his body like beans being fried as his tendons and bones rang together. Splash! Su Zimo slashed. The tide sounded. In a countercurrent. See Calming Manual. Countercurrent Stance. Chapter 443. Successor of Divine Phoenix Island. Chapter 443. Successor of Divine Phoenix Island. Su Zimo's saber was accompanied by a mighty force that could tear through towering waves, going against the current in a domineering manner as if it could cut through everything and sever all living beings. That massive force that threatened to tear through the voids attracted countless gazes. This is Saber Force! Some paragons exclaimed in shock. The sound of the tide was too clear and its force was way too terrifying such that all the paragons present could recognize it. That slash was already at the second level of saber techniques, force. However, not all the paragons could identify the origin of that slash. Only Hang Qiuyu of Sword Sect and Bai Yu of Zenith Sect narrowed their gazes before remarking slowly, countercurrent stance of the Sea Calming Manual. The moment those words were said, a huge wave of shock swept through the battlefield. While not everyone was able to recognize the origin of that saber technique, all of them have heard of the Sea Calming Manuals. It was the ultimate technique used by the first Saber Emperor to sweep across the world. Back in the ancient era, the Saber Emperor left Tianhuang mainland and traveled overseas. Right now, in the cultivation world, there was only a single successor of a place that knew of that saber technique. Divine Phoenix Island. He's the successor of Divine Phoenix Island. No wonder he doesn't dare to reveal his sect badge. The major factions of the cultivation world were the 9 immortal sects, 7 fiend sects, 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 heretical doctrines, 4 unorthodox groups, 3 aristocrat families, 2 islands and 1 palace. Among them, the 2 islands were established overseas and rarely set foot on Tianhuang mainland. Without much news, they were the most mysterious. Divine Phoenix Island was one of the 2 islands. Due to the relationship between the Saber Emperor and Sword Emperor in the ancient era, the feud between the 2 super sects, Divine Phoenix Island and Sword Sect, had also existed for a long time. Each time a successor of Divine Phoenix Island stepped foot onto Tianhuang mainland, it would naturally cause a huge commotion in the continent and bloodshed as well. He's the successor of Divine Phoenix Island? The last time a successor of Divine Phoenix Island appeared was 10,000 years ago. In the distance, the sealers muttered and frowned slightly. Everyone had heard the news of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea disappearing, and someone obtaining the inheritance of the Saber Emperor. However, it was impossible for someone to reach the level of force within such a short period of time. The only possibility was if it was the successor of Divine Phoenix Island, who had cultivated the Tao of the Saber since he was young and immersed himself in the sea calming manual for many years. On the battlefield, almost all the Paragons believed that this burly man in linen clothes came from Divine Phoenix Island. However, Bai Yu of Zenith Sect had a grim expression and a dark gaze that lingered for a long time on Xueqi. He did not know whether the successor of Divine Phoenix Island entered the ancient battlefield. However, he witnessed another cultivator obtaining the Saber Emperor's inheritance and releasing countercurrent in the same way personally. Be it in terms of appearance, attire, figure or even weapon used, the burly man before him was way too different from that green-robed cultivator. However, the 2 of them had similarities as well. They were both strong in physique and cultivated the countercurrent force. Furthermore, based on the green-robed cultivator's cultivation realm back then, it would make sense for him to be at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment right now. Most importantly, the burly man and green-robed cultivator were both related to Demonis G. Before Bai Yu could finish his thought, a change happened on the battlefield. Monk Ju Chen and Hollow Monastery Successor endured the greatest pressure faced with Xueqi's attack and they were extremely shocked. By now, it was too late for the both of them to stop. Clang! Clang! There were 2 loud bangs that happened at the same time. Before Hollow Monastery Successor could fall from midair, he was knocked flying by a massive force and thrown far away. His alloy steel rod was sent flying and he spat out a mouthful of blood as he fell onto the ground. Eyes tightly shut with a pale expression. He had already fainted. He was severely injured after a single attack. Yet another Paragon had lost the rights to fight. Monk Ju Chen gripped his diamond staff firmly with both hands and used all his strength, channeling the spirit energy in his dantian to its limits. Opening his eyes widely, his blood chi surged and his body was covered with a tough layer as he chanted, "Indestructible diamond. Thad, thad, thad." Even so, he could not stop the massive force and retreated continuously. With each step, a deep footprint would appear on the ground. After retreating 7 steps, Monk Ju Chen was still unable to steady himself as he fell on his but with blood oozing from the side of his lips in a pathetic manner. Compared to Hollow Monastery Successor, he was only mildly injured and could still fight. Xueqi did not stop after forcing back 2 Paragons with a single slash. In a flash, he appeared on another side of the battlefield in the blink of an eye. Right now, Demonis G was in a perilous situation. She had just defended against Snowdrift Valley Successor's flying sword and Clear Heart Nunnery's nun's flying sword was arriving. The angle of that attack was extremely tricky. It stabbed from the bottom of her waist and curved upwards. Demonis G's eyes and lips had a layer of frost on them and her movements were sluggish. Just as the sword was about to strike her, a saber beam flashed through the battlefield. A figure appeared before her. It was a familiar sight. Swash! Xueqi cut right into the battlefield and raised his saber once more. Unlike countercurrent, this attack was extremely soft, as if ripples were forming on the surface of a lake as a shimmering light coiled Clear Heart Nunnery's nun's sword inside instantly. Clang! Clang! There were a series of collisions. With each collision, the nun's face would turn paler. See Calming Manual. Ripple Stance. The ripple stance was as smooth as water and once released, it would attack relentlessly until another saber beam flashed. The sword in the hands of the nun was repelled and her exposed chest was met with a slash. Poof! Flashes of blood appeared. Ah! Exclaiming, the nun staggered in retreat as a bloodied wound appeared on her chest with blood flowing out. It was lucky that she had crushed a protection talisman earlier on, or that slash would have cut her into two. Another Paragon was forced out of the fight. Shoo! The sound of a sharp blade tearing through the air was chilling. Slashing in reverse, Suximo struck the incoming flying sword and a layer of frost appeared on his saber. At the same time, the voice of Snowdrift Valley's successor sounded. Frost Seal! A cold wind that seeped into one's bones struck Suximo, and he felt as though someone had poured a basin of cold water from above. Under the watchful gazes of many, a thick layer of ice could be seen forming on Suximo's body in a visible speed. Starting from his head, it spread gradually and covered his entire body. In the blink of an eye, Suximo was motionless as he maintained his previous saber stance with a frozen expression. He had turned into a lifelike ice sculpture. At the sight of that, some Paragons heaved a sigh of relief. The strength that Suximo displayed was way too terrifying. Furthermore, it was so overwhelming that 3 Paragons had fallen in his hands. Of the many Paragons present, no one had absolute confidence of suppressing him. Good move, fellow Taoist Ling Han. It's no wonder why you're the successor of Snowdrift Valley. Amazing to think that you froze the successor of Divine Phoenix Island instantly with a single frost seal. Some Paragons praised one after another. Demoness G's heart sank as endless worry surged in her eyes. Without even purging away the frost chi within her, she shivered and wanted to head forth to rescue Suximo. It's too late. Ling Han, the successor of Snowdrift Valley, descended from the skies with her white robes fluttering. She declared coldly with a haughty expression, "That's Snowdrift Valley's secret skill. Anyone that's struck by it will have their bloodlines and spirit energy frozen, and they'll die within 10 breaths. Is that so?" Suddenly, a strange voice sounded from the battlefield. Chapter 444, Saber and Sword Showdown. Chapter 444, Saber and Sword Showdown. Everyone could clearly tell that the voice came from within the ice sculpture. Crack, crack, crack. Along with cracking sounds, a series of cracks appeared on the ice sculpture, extending and growing until they covered the entire body. Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han's expression changed as disbelief filled her eyes. Boom! There was a deafening sound. Right in front of everyone, the ice sculpture exploded, revealing a tall and burly figure. The sound of a tsunami could be heard from that person's body as it echoed in a shuddering manner. Tsunami blood! Someone exclaimed softly. This sudden change caused many Paragons that were fighting to stop temporarily and turn their gazes over. Zenith Sex by Yu's gaze shimmered and his expression was grim. The burly man before him had yet another similarity with the green-robed cultivator at the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Both of them were at the Tsunami Blood Realm. Of course, it was quite an absurd guess, and it was mostly due to Bai Yu's intuition. While it was possible for a cultivator to change his appearance by making use of some concealment technique or mask-type spirit weapon, it was impossible for them to change so drastically in terms of figure. That was something that could not be explained. Sensing Bai Yu's gaze, Suximo was expressionless as killing intent rose in his heart. Suximo was filled with boiling blood that cruised through his limbs and organs, purging away the frost chi within him. The frost between his brows and hair was gone and steam rose from his head. Surrounded by the mist, Suximo was like a supreme immortal king that could not be ignored. Ha 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 ha! Casting an arrogant sidelong glance at Snowdrift Valley's successor not far away, Suximo could not help but burst into laughter. What bullshit frost seal is that? That's all there is to it? Ling Han's face was deathly pale and her arms were trembling in anger. There had never been anyone who looked down on Snowdrift Valley's secret skill like this. In other words, if Divine Phoenix Island's successor had not managed to cultivate to the realm of tsunami blood, there was no way he would have been able to break free from the power of Frost Seal. Suximo retreated a couple of steps and glanced at Demoness G, who was shivering from head to toe. Frowning slightly, he reached out and held her palm, circulating his spirit energy, causing it to surge into her body. Although Suximo's cultivation realm was a level lower than the Paragons present, his spirit energy was much purer and richer, carrying a scorching heat like a blazing sun. A warm energy surged within Demoness G's body, purging the frost chi from her slowly. Perhaps it was because she had recovered some blood chi, Or perhaps it was some other reason, but Demoness G's pale face blushed with a darker shade of red. She lowered her head slightly in a shy and charming manner, causing everyone's hearts to flutter. The Paragons present had different expressions upon seeing this. Everyone could tell that Divine Phoenix Island Successor had a very different attitude towards the pure maiden of the Fiend sections. It didn't seem like he was bewitched by her. It was impossible that the both of them had a casual relationship. Divine Phoenix Island Successor was clearly very worried about the pure maiden of the Fiend sex, worried that she might get injured. Humph! Flicking his wrist, Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain Sect opened his folding fan and said in a salty tone, Demoness G, don't you have any ethics? You even hooked up with the successor of Divine Phoenix Island. Demoness G ignored everyone's strange gazes. She merely pursed her red lips and looked at Su Zimo unblinkingly, as though she was covered in a layer of mist. Softly she said, You still want to deny it. Her voice was extremely soft such that only the two of them could hear it. Pulling her behind him, Su Zimo said softly, Heal your injuries first. Demoness G smiled. Warmth flowed through her heart. Su Zimo's statement was akin to a silent acknowledgement of her deduction. Earlier on, when this person came forth and forced Monk Ju Chen back while exposing his back to her, Demoness G had already guessed it. However, she did not dare confirm her guess at that time. It was only until earlier on when this person appeared again to prevent her from taking lethal damage that Demoness G was certain that this was Su Zimo. She knew in her heart that everything Su Zimo did was because of her sister, Yao Xue. However, that did not matter to her. At the very least, there was someone who would trust and protect her unconditionally in this world. Even if that meant going against all the Paragons. Even if she was the pure maiden of the Fiend sections. Divine Phoenix Island Successor. Sword Sex Hang Choyu narrowed his eyes and the aura that he was emitting turned sharper and sharper. His entire figure resembled an unsheathed sword and he said slowly, Good, good. Since you dare to enter the ancient battlefield, don't dream about leaving it alive. Divine Phoenix Island and Sword Sect had a long-standing feud. Each time a successor of Divine Phoenix Island stepped foot onto Tianhuang mainland, they would naturally end up in a big fight with the successor of Sword Sect. This is a feud between us. Fellow Taoists of the Fiend sects, there's no need for you guys to get involved. Cupping his fists towards Pang Yu and the others, Hang Choyu said in a low voice. Heh! Pang Yu retrieved his black iron spear and slung it over his shoulder, laughing. Well said, well said. The Fiend sects chose to sit this one out and reap the spoils later. Since there was nothing but benefits for them, this was completely aligned with the thoughts of the Fiend heirs. Watch out. Hang Choyu's sword is extremely fast. There's a high possibility that he still has tricks up his sleeves. Demoness G reminded Su Zimo softly. Laughing, Su Zimo was completely unaffected. Raising his saber, he had no intention of wasting his breath on Hang Choyu as he strode over in huge steps. Sword Sex Successor? That's great. I'll sever your head as a tribute for my saber. Dressed in linen clothes with a bared chest and spouting crude statements made Su Zimo seem like an unruly and wild person. Even Bai Yu lamented to himself that the aura of this person before him was much less dignified compared to that green-robed scholar from before. Swoosh! Closing in, Su Zimo's eyes lit up. The moment he struck, he started with countercurrent and his saber beam expanded, engulfing Hang Choyu entirely. Foo-foo! Sneering coldly, Hang Choyu's fingers slid down his sword before flicking the blade. Buzz! The sword quivered and let out a clear buzzing sound. All of a sudden, Hang Choyu attacked. His wrist trembled and the blade was already nowhere to be seen. Instead, a cold flash arrived and spread out, causing the void to be filled with dense spots of sword lights like raindrops that shot out in all directions. The place sounded like it was raining. It was a heavy and intense sound. Sword Force. The eyes of the Paragons lit up. That's the secret skill of Sword Sex Tao of the Sword, Sword Rain Manual. Hang Choyu was indeed keeping aces up his sleeves. Pang Yu nodded his head but was not surprised. On the one hand it was the countercurrent force. On the other hand it was the Sword Rain force. Cling! Clang! After a series of collisions, the saber and sword forces dissipated and both their figures resurfaced once more. The two of them were in an even standoff. Although the countercurrent force was extremely tough, The raindrops produced by the sword rain force struck the saber repeatedly, causing the power that was produced to dissipate away. By the time the saber cut through, almost all of its power was gone. However, Xueqi had always had a nagging feeling. Although he managed to cultivate to the realm of force for countercurrent, he felt that something was lacking in it. Notwithstanding the fact that Xueqi was unable to produce the final stance of Sea Calming Manual, he had a feeling that something was lacking while he practiced his first 4 stances. He felt that there was a sense of sluggishness when he tried connecting the first 4 stances. If he could make up for that tiny flaw, even Hang Qiuyu's sword rain force wouldn't be able to deal with his countercurrent. Chapter 445. 3 Great Paragons. Chapter 445. 3 Great Paragons. The many paragons frowned. Although it seemed like the clash between the saber and sword was even, in reality, Hang Qiuyu had lost slightly. Hang Qiuyu's startling sword was a perfect spirit weapon. Furthermore, to begin with, Hang Qiuyu was at 8 Meridian Foundation establishment while the successor of Divine Phoenix Island was only at 7. It was clear who was better. You dare to step foot onto Tianhuang mainland to stir up trouble with just those capabilities. Scoffing coldly, Hang Qiuyu glared at Xueqi with a provocative gaze as the sword in his hand shimmered faintly in the void. This is all I need to suppress you. Roaring in laughter, Xueqi's bloodline churned and the sound of tsunami rumbled from his body. With a single stride, he appeared before Hang Qiuyu and made a slash. There were no fancy tricks as he simplified everything with a single slash. Coupled with the terrifying power of his bloodline, his sword beam expanded in a frightening manner as it tore through the void. Hang Qiuyu channeled his bloodline as well and his 8 Meridian spirit energy burst forth. He was like an unsheathed blade that fused with his startling sword as one. Kill! Without retreating or dodging, Hang Qiuyu wanted to rely on his advantage in terms of cultivation realm to fight Xueqi head-on. In the cultivation world, sword cultivators were acknowledged to be the strongest in terms of offense. The sword and saber collided in midair. Sparks flew everywhere as the sword chi and saber beam devoured one another mutually. The spirit chi between the two of them instantly entered a berserk state, torn into pieces by the sword chi and saber beam. Hang Qiuyu's sword was edged and extremely sharp. On the other hand, Xueqi's saber was resolute and majestic. Clang, clang, clang. The sword and saber clashed relentlessly in midair. The saber light was cold and the sword shadows fluttered everywhere in a dizzying manner. This was a battle of strength without much technique involved. Xueqi's eyes turned brighter as he fought fiercer while laughing into the skies. Well done, well done. You're quite capable to be able to withstand 10 slashes of mine. Again. As though fatigue meant nothing to him, Xueqi's strength was increasing instead of decreasing despite that intense clash. Ta, ta, ta. With every single step he took, the ground would quake once and his aura would climb a step further, causing his sword force to turn stronger. Every single slash felt like a towering wave that was crashing from above, covering the skies. Hang Qiuyu was no longer taunting his opponent and looked grim. His arms were feeling numb and his vision was blurring against the attacks. Those were signs of fatigue. This guy's stamina is like a bottomless pit. Why doesn't he have any limits? Hang Qiuyu was secretly shocked. If this continued, he would show signs of losing within the next 10 slashes. I've got to change tactics. At that thought, a resolute look flickered through Hang Qiuyu's eyes as he flicked his wrist. Instantly, his sword quivered and burst forth brightly with a sword light in midair. Spots of lights shot over, shining in a bedazzling manner. That was a move from the Sword Rain manual which was used to affect the opponent's vision using sword light. In fact, it could even blind them momentarily, causing them to reveal fatal openings. However, it was a pity as a demonic glint flickered through Xueqi's eyes. Lightening up, they were like 2 bright stars in a dark night, completely unaffected as they shimmered deeply. A single slash cut through, tearing through the light and colliding against the startling sword. Clang! Hang Qiuyu shuddered and his startling sword nearly flew from his hands. Upon seeing that, Monk Ju Chen, who was at the sidelines, frowned slightly. Mad Blade's vision and hearing are both extremely strong and his mental state is calm as a rock. I couldn't even affect him despite using my enraged diamond gaze and lion roar together. The Paragons felt their hearts skip a beat. Everyone thought about how difficult it would be for them if they had to be faced with the enraged diamond gaze and lion roar together. Yet, the successor of Divine Phoenix Island was completely unaffected. Something is amiss. Ao Yuxiao of Purple Firmament Sect had extremely strong vision, and he could see the situation clearly. With a grim expression, he remarked suddenly, Hang Qiuyu's going to lose. On the battlefield. Hang Qiuyu's expression was dark as he retreated endlessly. He could retaliate no longer. On the contrary, Su Zimo's saber beam was intensifying as he advanced, shrouding Hang Qiuyu within it. In less than 10 moves, a victor would be decided if the battle continued as such. Shoo! Suddenly, a shuddering sound tore through the void. A purple chi flew over. 7 purple chis tore through the air and combined in the void, forming a gigantic purple long sword with a might so brazen that it was stifling. Ao Yuxiao of Purple Firmament Sect had struck. After all, Divine Phoenix Island was alone overseas and rarely appeared on Tianhuang mainland. Their impact on the cultivation world was far inferior compared to Sword Sect. Furthermore, Sword Sect was one of the 9 immortal sects at the end of the day, and enjoyed a good relationship with many other sections. Purple Firmament Sect was one of them. The purple sword advanced with a torrential power, as though an emperor had descended with a sharp aura. Su Zimo had no choice but to pause in his tracks. If he continued hunting down Hang Qiuyu, he would definitely be struck by the purple sword and he would be severely injured even if he managed to survive. Su Zimo's expression was indifferent, as though he had already predicted this. Retracting his saber, the direction of his blade steered and released the vortex stance of the sea calming manual. A contorting force burst forth from the saber and collided heavily against the purple sword. Quivering, the purple sword was almost sent flying. Su Zimo's figure trembled, but he maneuvered himself gently with his movement technique and descended on the ground. With the breathing room, Hang Qiuyu managed to escape and he was drenched in sweat as he panted slightly. Standing beside Ao Yuxiao, they formed a triangular arc to stand off against Su Zimo. This fight is between Divine Phoenix Island and Sword Sect. As one of the 9 immortal sects, Purple Firmament Sect isn't going to respect the laws of the pugilistic world and intends to bully with numbers? Demoness Ji was originally recovering from her injuries at the sidelines. However, she could not help but frown when she saw this and questioned loudly. Right now, we're fighting for the human emperor's palace. There's no laws of the pugilistic world to speak of. Ao Yuxiao was expressionless as he beckoned to retrieve the purple sword in midair. Since the successor of Divine Phoenix Island dares to step foot onto Tianhuang mainland, he should be prepared to receive a challenge from the successors of all the major sects. Cut the crap. Since you want to fight, I'll include you as well. Laughing loudly, Su Zimo raised his saber and strode forward. Instantly, his saber beam expanded and engulfed Ao Yuxiao and Hang Qiuyu completely. He was taking the initiative even in a 1-against-2 situation. The Paragons felt their hearts skip a beat. Such guts! Overlord Palace's Pang Yu's eyes shone brightly as he said in a slow manner. He has the guts, but we don't know whether he can survive this. Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain Sect sneered. Zenith Sect's Bai Yu had a grim expression as he kept his gaze on Su Zimo the entire time in deep thought. On the battlefield, the sound of tsunami coming forth from Su Zimo's body rumbled louder and louder, as though thunder was crackling from within. His power of bloodline was shocking and his stamina was enduring. Even after battling for more than 10 rounds, Su Zimo was able to get an advantage in a 1 versus 2 situation, suppressing Ao Yuxiao and Hang Qiuyu completely. The two of them were looking grimmer by the moment. Fellow Taoists, do not worry. Here I come. Monk Ju Chen, who was initially standing by the sidelines watching, saw that the situation was not going too well. Wielding his golden bell in his left hand and his diamond staff in his right, he hollered and joined the battlefield fiercely. The 3 of them could practically be considered as the 3 strongest paragons among the immortal and Buddhist sects. Chapter 446, All-Star Battle, Unparalleled Pride. Chapter 446, All-Star Battle, Unparalleled Pride. The 3 great paragons of the immortal and Buddhist sects were ganging up on a single person. If word of this spread to the cultivation world, It would definitely cause an uproar. Ah! Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and his chest puffed massively, letting out a long roar. His bloodline expanded and he slashed thrice in succession almost at the same time. Each slash carried forth a shuddering power shockwave. Bang! 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 The first slash struck the startling sword, forcing Hang Qiuyu back. The second slash struck the purple sword. The purple chi surrounding Ao Yuxiao was linked to it and as such, it shook violently and most of it dissipated. The final slash struck the diamond staff, causing Monk Ju Chen to grunt dully. His expression changed starkly as he staggered in retreat repeatedly. Su Zimo was fearless against the combined attacks of the three great paragons. Instead, the power he emitted was even more terrifying and his aura was fiercer, as though it could suppress everything. The three of them were not the only ones shocked. Even all the paragons watching were stunned. How did Divine Phoenix Island create someone like that? If he was already in possession of such tremendous strength at 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment, who could stop him if they were all at the same level of 8 Meridian Foundation Establishment? There was no wonder why Divine Phoenix Island dared to allow this man into the ancient battlefield. A successor as such was already showing signs of being unstoppable. If nothing went wrong, there was an extremely high chance that he would definitely receive the title of an emperor in the future. Before many paragons could finish that thought, Su Zimo's next statement caused a huge stir in everyone's hearts. After forcing the three great paragons back with 3 consecutive slashes, his aura was torrential and he swept his gaze across the paragons like lightning. Everyone who was here at the Human Emperor's Palace were all the elites of the super sex and had great pride and ego. Even though Su Zimo was extremely strong and had ferocious methods, none of them would want to admit defeat against him before they fought with him. All the paragons were raring to give it a shot. Well, well, well. Nodding his head, Su Zimo's bloodline surged. His bones and tendons rang together as he declared loudly, "Let's save the trouble. All of you can come at me together. I'll deal with all of you at the same time. Deal with all of you at the same time. Deal with all of you at the same time." Su Zimo's voice was like a gigantic bell that rang through the universe, reverberating in everyone's minds for the longest time. The moment he said that, everyone present was shocked. What did that imply? It meant that he wanted to face all the paragons of the immortal and Buddhist sects single-handedly. His pride and guts were extremely rare across history and were comparable to that of an emperor's. Overlord Palace's Pang Yu said slowly, "He's not called Mad Blade for nothing. He's truly mad." Even Pang Yu could not help but acknowledge his inferiority at that moment. No matter the outcome of this battle, he wouldn't have dared to make that bold statement personally. He was not the only one. All of the paragons, Hang Qiuyu and Ao Yuxiao included, would not dare make a claim as such. It was complete arrogance that looked down on the immortal and Buddhist sects. Steel is easily snapped if it's too rigid. Does this guy really think of himself as an emperor? Cloud Rain Sect's Shangguanyu sneered. "Don't forget that you're just a Foundation Establishment cultivator. I don't believe that Mad Blade will be able to suppress all the paragons of the immortal and Buddhist sects single-handedly." That's right. The Fiend Heir of Illusion Fiend cult nodded in agreement. Hang Qiuyu and the others definitely have trump cards up their sleeves still. If they fight till the end and piss off all the paragons, causing them to fight with all their might, that man is bound to die. On the battlefield. Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han was the first to step forward as she declared coldly with a frosty expression. "Since you looked down on Snowdrift Valley's secret skill earlier on, I'll come and take you on. If that's the case, I, Chan Yitzi of Chaos Essence Sect, wants to have a taste of Divine Phoenix Island's ultimate moves as well." Another paragon stood forth together with Hang Qiuyu and the others. Right after, another paragon leaped forward onto the battlefield, saying in a low voice, "I'm from Zephyr Thunder Palace." "Stop talking." Su Zimo raised his hand and interrupted impatiently before continuing indifferently, "If you want to fight, fight. I'm not interested in knowing more." "You." Zephyr Thunder Palace's successor's face was black after being cut as he grit his teeth angrily. In the blink of an eye, Hang Qiuyu's group of 3, Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han, Chaos Essence Sect's Chen Yitzi, Zephyr Thunder Palace's successor, Clear Wind Temple successor, Formless Monastery successor and Wisdom Monastery successor arrived on the battlefield. The 9 paragons looked unfriendly as they moved slowly, surrounding Suzumo in the middle. Demoness G was instantly panicked when she saw that. Looking at the fiend airs around her, she asked with a frown. Are you guys just going to stand by and watch? If Mad Blade loses, the successors of the immortal and Buddhist sects are going to turn their attention to us and we of the fiend sects are still going to be disadvantaged. He asked for this. Cloud Rain sect's Shangguan Yu laughed. Furthermore, who knows? Perhaps this fellow Taoist of Divine Phoenix Island might be able to take down all 9 Paragons single-handedly, gaining fame after this single battle. Pang Yu and the others were calm. Clearly, they had no intention of stepping in. There was naturally no way they would make a move before determining if the situation was in their favor. Zenith Sect's Bai Yu had a sinister expression. Suddenly he said in an ambiguous manner, if I step in, there's no guarantee whose side I'll be on. Because the battle had already started, Demoness G did not pay attention to the deeper meaning behind Bai Yu's words. Since there's so much hype, count me in. Chuckling lightly with a faked composure, Demoness G chose to join the battlefield. Given her strength, the most she could do was hold off a single Paragon to take some of the pressure off Suzumo's shoulders. However, he still had to face 8 Paragons all by himself. Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han furrowed her brows and broke out of the battle to hold off Demoness G. The two beauties brought their battle to a corner, fighting in a graceful and stunning manner. Although this was the first time they joined forces, the 8 Paragons had a chemistry in their coordination. Sword Sect's Hang Qiuyu and Diamond Monastery's monk Ju Chen joined hands to fight Suzumo in melee combat. The other 6 Paragons kept their distance from Suzumo, making use of their spirit weapons and arts to summon a flurry of attacks as spirit light and sword chi streaked through and filled the skies. Bang! Bang! Suzumo slashed twice in succession, colliding heavily against the startling sword and the diamond staff. Hang Qiuyu and monk Ju Chen shuddered, retreating half a step back. However, Suzumo made use of that rebound power to stomp on the ground before leaping backwards. His body was almost stuck to the ground as he evaded many spirit weapons and arts by a shave. Ao Yuxiao was calm when he saw Suzumo approaching him. Riding on his flying sword, he retreated swiftly to keep his distance. Chaos Essence Sect's Chen Yixi's eyes flickered brightly. That person is at the realm of tsunami blood and his physique and melee combat strength is terrifying. Everyone, there's no need to fight him head-on. As long as we keep our distance, we can definitely wear him out. The Paragons present were long prepared and they supported one another. Coupled with the fact that there were 8 of them, there was naturally no way they would allow Suzumo to close in. The moment Suzumo charged towards one of them, the other 7 would attack to block his path forward. Hang Qiuyu and monk Ju Chen were like cockroaches, chasing forward to embroil Suzumo in battle. The spirit chi on the battlefield was already boiling long ago. The 8 Paragons combined forces and their figures intertwined and shifted repeatedly, restricting Suzumo to his position. Even so, the waves of attacks that were produced by the 8 of them were still unable to break through Suzumo's defense. He was blocking everything with his saber. As time passed by, the 8 Paragons felt increasingly alarmed and their killing intents intensified. All 8 of them professed internally that if they were in Suzumo's position, they would not last more than 10 breaths against such attacks. Even if they could defend all the attacks, it would take too much of a toll on them. Even golden cores might not be able to endure through it. However, 15 minutes had already passed by now. Not only was the successor of Divine Phoenix Island feeling no fatigue, the battle intent in his eyes was intensifying and his gaze shone brighter. His entire aura was on a continuous rise. If this continued on, the outcome would be unpredictable. Chapter 447, Raging Tides, Faint Killing Intent. Chapter 447, Raging Tides, Faint Killing Intent. It was a shocking battle. On the battlefield, spirit light filled the skies and sword chi intertwined with the saber beam as spirit energy surged. With each collision, a blinding light would shoot forth and fill the 9 heavens with a deafening boom. There were still some cultivators who were more gutsy and remained to watch the battle beneath the human emperor's palace from afar. Because they were too far away, all of them could not make out the appearances of the Paragons. However, they could still make out a mighty figure streaking through the battlefield against all odds. Although he was surrounded by 8 Paragons, he was not nervous in the slightest bit. It did not matter how famous or bedazzling sword sex Hang Qiuyu and purple firmament sex Ao Yuxiao were prior to this. At this moment, in the face of Divine Phoenix Island's successor, they seemed so lackluster. That was a true paragon. Bang, bang, bang. Clashing sounds echoed repeatedly from the battlefield. Despite the fact that he was fighting 1 against 8, Su Zimo was getting fiercer, and he was even showing signs of turning the tides as he shrouded all 8 paragons. With his immortality and demonic cultivation, coupled with the fact that he had cultivated to the legendary Tsunami Blood Realm, he had a strong physique and terrifying stamina. He was confident that he could overwhelm any strong foes at the Realm of Foundation establishment. He used his full strength with every strength, swinging widely like a supreme emperor that could sweep through the 9 heavens with an invincible might, looking down on everything. Even the sealers that were watching from outside the human emperor's palace were stunned, let alone the cultivators who were watching from afar. He was way too strong. Apart from Su Zimo's terrifying strength, his stamina was limitless like a bottomless pit. It was extremely frightening. To think that Divine Phoenix Island would have produced such an amazing monster with unparalleled potential. The sealers were expressionless as they exchanged glances. All of them could make out fleeting killing intents in the other's eyes. If this person was already producing such an invincible aura at such a young age, who could stop him in the future? They had to murder this talent. At that moment, all the sealers had the same thought. However, they were sealers after all, and the moment they attacked would be the moment they died. Unless they had no other choice, they wouldn't attack recklessly. On the battlefield, the 8 paragons were no longer as nimble as before. Monk Ju Chen had minor injuries to begin with. After clashing head-on with Su Zimo, he triggered his internal injuries once more and he looked terrible. There was even a faint blood stench when he panted. His internal organs were already shaken. Su Zimo was equally lively with a raring fighting intent. If the battle carried on as such, Monk Ju Chen's organs would be ruptured and he would die before Su Zimo was even exhausted. The other paragons were starting to look pale and panted as well. Suddenly, Sword Sex Hang Qiuyu shouted, "Fellow Taoists of the Fiend sects, only one of us can obtain the human emperor's palace's inheritance. Look at how strong this guy is. If you guys don't start attacking, by the time we fall, all of you from the Fiend sects are going to be suppressed too." The cultivators who were watching from afar were stunned and shocked when they heard that. If the Fiend heirs were to take part in the fight, it would mean that the paragons of the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects would be ganging up on a cultivator of the same cultivation realm. Even ancient emperors would not have been treated the same way. The few Fiend heirs had conflicting expressions. However, in their opinions, Hang Qiuyu's words made sense as well. Once the paragons of the Immortal and Buddhist sects fall, the few of them won't be a match for that person. There was a high chance that he would be the one to obtain the human emperor's palace's inheritance. Overlord Palace's Pang Yu loved to fight to begin with. Upon encountering someone as strong as Su Zimo, he was naturally raring to fight and wanted to join the battlefield. At that thought, the few Fiend heirs were tempted, but they were still hesitant. Among them, there was only a single person who made his decision. It was Bai Yu, the Fiend heir of Zenith sect. He had a feeling that the successor of Divine Phoenix Island definitely had something to do with the green-robed cultivator. Suddenly, a roar sounded from the battlefield. Raging tides. His words were accompanied by a deafening boom, as if a massive tide had crashed onto the shore in a terrifying manner. In the center of the battlefield, Su Zimo wielded his saber and spun a circle in midair. Massive tides seemed to form everywhere his saber sliced, surging towards the 8 paragons in a ferocious manner. Saber force. Against the combined attacks of 8 paragons from the Immortal and Buddhist sects, the unprecedented pressure had finally allowed Su Zimo to comprehend the raging tide stance of the Sea Calming Manual. Countercurrent was the toughest saber technique to target a single cultivator with. However, Raging Tides was suited for dealing with opponents in all directions. With that slash, Raging Tides were formed, roaring and threatening to drown everything, destroying the 8 desolates. At this point of the battle, Su Zimo burst forth with a massive counterattack and the Raging Tides rumbled, engulfing the 8 paragons into the series of saber forces. Instantly, all 8 paragons were on the brink of danger. That's enough. Suddenly, Hang Qiuyu's cold voice that was filled with killing intent could be heard from the flurry of saber forces. Break it! Hollering, he slapped his storage bag and a silver circlet flew out, hovering in midair before bursting with a blinding radiance. 1, 2, 6 spirit patterns. It was a Connate spirit weapon. The fact that a Connate spirit weapon was given to a Foundation establishment cultivator was evident of how much Hang Chuoyu was valued in Sword Sect. This was his final trump card. Initially, he had intended to keep it until the final fight for the human Emperor's Palace's inheritance to suppress everyone. But given the current circumstances, he had no choice but to use it in advance. Purple Firmament Slash. Against raging tides, Ao Yuxiao could not hide any longer as well as he conjured a hand seal, releasing a secret skill of Purple Firmament Sect. Shrouded by purple chi, an extremely sharp purple sword was condensed in midair before slicing the incoming raging tides fiercely. Indestructible Diamond. Monk Ju Chen's hands were shifting continuously as he conjured a hand seal of the Buddhist sects while chanting obscure scriptures. Instantly, his body seemed as though it was covered by a layer of saintly glow that illuminated brightly. Against the raging tides, Monk Ju Chen was calm like a Vajra of the Buddhist sections. His eyes were closed and he was unmoved even as the wave washed over him. The three of them were not the only ones. The other 5 Paragons released their final trump cards one after another as well. Some of them brought out perfect-grade defensive spirit weapons, some of them crushed protection talismans with resplendent patterns, and others released ultimate secret skills of their sects. They were all proving their capabilities. Almost at the same time, Zenith Sex Bai Yu's figure flashed as he wielded a spirit saber and charged towards Su Zimo's back with a torrential killing intent. Bai Yu! Demoness Ji exclaimed when she saw that, wanting to strike and force back Bai Yu. However, Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han's flying sword was moving swifter and swifter, restricting Demoness Ji to the spot such that she was unable to break free. The situation on the battlefield was shifting rapidly and Su Zimo's raging tides expanded widely, looking as though it was about to defeat the 8 Paragons soon. Yet, all 8 of them released their trump cards unexpectedly and withstood raging tides head-on. Furthermore, Hang Chuoyu and Ao Yuxiao managed to counterattack and a Connate spirit weapon was even brought out. Between the saber and sword flashes, an imperceptible figure appeared without warning like a ghost, creeping towards Su Zimo. There was a faint killing intent that appeared. Chapter 448. Trying to Escape? Chapter 448. Trying to Escape. Zenith Sex Bai Yu. When he saw Bai Yu charging over from the sides, Su Zimo already realized that his identity was being suspected. At that thought, Su Zimo's killing intent rose massively as well. All of a sudden, an unprecedented sense of danger surged into his heart. Su Zimo's hair stood on end and his scalp prickled. The feeling of danger did not come from Hang Chuoyu, Ao Yuxiao, any of the 8 Paragons or Zenith Sex Bai Yu who was charging towards him from behind. It was someone else. It was someone that Su Zimo could not see with his eyes. However, his keen spirit perception gained from cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness informed him that an extremely scary cultivator was hidden in a corner, waiting to deal him a fatal blow. The attacker's angle could be considered as perfect as it was in Su Zimo's blind spots. The timing of the attack was also perfect without any flaws at all. At that moment, Su Zimo had just released raging tides and was in the weakest state as he was recovering from the momentum of his action. Furthermore, the 8 Paragons had just released their trump cards and Hang Chuoyu and Ao Yuxiao were counterattacking. A Connate spirit weapon was even brought out. Coupled with the fact that Bai Yu was arriving from the back, Su Zimo was already cornered by enemies on all fronts. Given those circumstances, the unknown cultivator's attack was a complete deadlock for Su Zimo such that it would be difficult even for deities to save him. Suddenly, a vague, blurry figure flashed through Su Zimo's mind. It wasn't because his memory was bad. Instead, nobody had seen that person's appearance before. It was the thousand-faced assassin of Hidden Death Sect. Prior to this, that killer from the Fiend sects had not made his appearance. Now that he attacked, he was aiming for Su Zimo's life. It's him. A few sealers close to the human emperor's palace narrowed their gazes and exclaimed. One of the sealers shook his head. It's over. That lad's a dead man now. Everyone nodded in agreement. To them, There was no way Su Zimo would be able to reverse this deadly situation given his abilities. What a pity. Even a paragon as such has to die at the human emperor's palace. There's nothing to be pitied about. Throughout history, there have been countless paragons who suffered early deaths. He's merely one of them. Suddenly, the tides changed on the battlefield. The 8 paragons released their skills respectively and 6 of them defended against raging tides while Hang Qiuyu and Ao Yuxiao counterattacked. A purple beam tore through the layers of tides and slashed towards Su Zimo. With a calm expression, Su Zimo spun his saber and slashed forward, intending to make use of his power of bloodline to fight Purple Firmament's secret skill head-on. Buzz! Buzz! Suddenly, a silver circlet tore through the air and buzzed while quivering. 6 blinding spirit lights shone like a blazing sun, emitting a terrifying aura. Clang! The silver circlet collided against the saber. Su Zimo shuddered. With a creak, cracks started appearing on the blade and it exploded. Destroyed! A supreme-grade spirit weapon was destroyed just like that. That was how terrifying Incarnate spirit weapons were. After circling in midair, the silver circlet reversed towards Su Zimo again. At the same time, Ao Yuxiao's purple firmament slash descended. Arriving at the back, Bai Yu's zenith saber slashed out at a sinister angle with a nauseating blood stench. The sounds of ghosts howling could be heard vaguely. Saber force. After losing to Su Zimo the previous time round, Bai Yu managed to break through as well and comprehended a saber force of the zenith saber. 3 ultimate killing moves descended at the same time. At the exact moment, an imperceptible figure appeared, wielding a long slender sword that was as thin as cicada wings. The person's appearance was ordinary and his eyes were listless like a dead fish. The killing intent that he possessed was completely innate, but his sword was aimed at the back of Su Zimo's head and was almost instantaneous. The destruction of the spirit saber made the situation even worse. Su Zimo was barehanded and had nowhere to retreat now. Upon seeing that, Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han and Demoness Ji stopped in their tracks instinctively. Ah! Blood drained from Demoness Ji's face as she exclaimed. A deafening sound rang in her mind and it went blank, as if someone had gripped her heart and stopped it from beating. All of a sudden. Battle! A holler that sounded like thunder booming tore through metal and stone while quaking one's mind. In reality, that was Su Zimo's thunderclap kill. However, in order to hide his identity, he changed the word from kill to battle without diminishing its strength. Even the cultivators who were watching from afar were so shocked that they shuddered in fear. They could not imagine how the 4 paragons closest to Su Zimo in the center of the battlefield were going to endure that terrifying blow. The 4 of them winced in pain at the same time. Be it the purple firmament slash, Hang Qiuyu's Connate spirit weapon, Bai Yu's zenith saber or the thousand-faced assassin's slender sword, everything paused for a brief moment. That momentary pause was Su Zimo's chance. Crackle! Leaping upwards, his tendons and bones sounded at the same time and his entire body crumpled into a ball. The burly man that was initially 2 meters tall turned into a meatball the size of an infant right in front of everyone. While his methods may seem ordinary if they were performed by an ancient mighty figure or patriarch, the fact that a Foundation establishment cultivator was doing it was unbelievable. His move, coupled with the burst of thunderclap kill, caused the attacks of the 4 paragons to miss. Not only that, Hang Qiuyu's Connate spirit weapon was even repelled towards Bai Yu. Ao Yuxiao's purple firmament slash landed in front of the thousand-faced assassin. Clang! Bai Yu shuddered and blood oozed from the corner of his lips. The power of a Connate spirit weapon was not something that everyone could withstand. The thousand-faced assassin managed to retract his sword in time, and made a decisive move to retreat swiftly after blocking the purple firmament slash by making use of its momentum. After missing his attack, he fled 1,000 miles away. Swoosh! A shuddering aura suddenly burst forth from within Su Zimo's body. It was as though a seal was undone, releasing a frightening fiend celestial. Roar! Groar! Screech! A series of strange sounds echoed from within Su Zimo's body. There was a dragon's roar, a tiger's howl, a horse's neigh, a phoenix's cry. Scarlet demonic chi burst forth and covered the skies. The infant-sized meatball disappeared, and in its place was a mighty figure that could faintly be seen as it was shrouded in thick demonic chi. A pair of ink-black eyes shone forth with a frightening shimmer. It was cold, sinister and filled with endless killing intent. Pest! The Paragons, sealers and cultivators watching from afar were shocked and gasped. Hang Qiuyu and the other three shuddered. In that instant, they had an illusion that the human before them who was surrounded by demonic qi seemed like he was about to devour them alive. You guys really think that you can kill me with your skills? In that endless scarlet demonic qi, Su Zimo's voice sounded, sending chills down everyone's spine as though he came from the primordial era where thousands of races stood mightily amidst torrential blood qi. Invoking his blood qi, Su Zimo took on his demon form, causing his strength and speed to explode. You're still trying to escape. Suddenly, Su Zimo's voice sounded in the thousand-faced assassin's ears. It was sinister and right beside him. Chapter 449. Kill. Chapter 449. Kill. As if a figure was shifting in front of him, the thousand-faced assassin paused in his tracks hurriedly. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already arrived before him with an imposing aura, blocking his escape path. It was too fast. Even with the thousand-faced assassin's calm personality, at that moment, he felt a series of chills. His expression changed slightly and his dead fish eyes flickered with a hint of panic. A mighty and tall figure stood up slowly from the ground, surrounded by rumbling demonic qi. The illusion of a malefic ancient demon was formed, baring its teeth and claws in a menacing lifelike manner. It was as though countless stars were revolving around a moon, shrouding the gigantic ancient demon in the center. Su Zimo's eyes were deep and pitch-black as he looked down at the thousand-faced assassin. It was a cold, taunting gaze. It was the same way an emperor was looking at an ant that was struggling to escape. Pest! Instantly, the thousand-faced assassin's heart skipped a beat and he felt chills run down his spine. The next moment, Su Zimo suddenly reached out with his gigantic palm that covered the skies, grabbing at the thousand-faced assassin's head with a torrential aura. The thousand-faced assassin was extremely swift to react, and he raised his sword while crushing a protection talisman at the same time. The blade of his sword quivered like a snake, emitting a sinister and chilling aura. To him, no matter what, Su Zimo was fighting bare-handed after all. There was no way a person's body could defend against the sharpness of a spirit weapon. All of a sudden, the thousand-faced assassin's pupils constricted. From the massive palm that was shrouded over his head, dagger-like fingernails suddenly shot out from its fingers, shimmering coldly like swords and sabers. Those fingernails looked like the claws of an ancient demon that were indestructible. In the blink of an eye, 5 fingernails struck the thousand-faced assassin's thin sword. Buzz! As though it was coiled by a venomous viper, the thousand-faced assassin's sword struggled repeatedly, but it could not break free and could only buzz and tremble. With a snap, the sword shattered. There was a commotion. A supreme-grade spirit weapon was crushed by Su Zimo's bare hands, turning into dim shards that scattered onto the ground near to the thousand-faced assassin's feet. The next moment, the thousand-faced assassin's vision darkened and he lost consciousness. His protection talisman was as fragile as tofu against Su Zimo's hand. The 5 fingernails pierced the barrier produced by the protection talisman instantly, and landed on the thousand-faced assassin's head with a dull sound. By the time Su Zimo retracted his hand, there were 5 bloodied holes on the thousand-faced assassin's head, oozing out with a white, gooey liquid. The thousand-faced assassin's dead fish eyes no longer lit up as he collapsed while standing upright. His life snapped away. The fiend heir of hidden death sect was killed right beneath the human emperor's palace. Everything went silent. A paragon had just died. It did not matter how strong or how glorious the thousand-faced assassin was prior to this. At this moment, he was no different from one of the lifeless corpses under the human emperor's palace. The heavens are often jealous of those who are talented. Since they were the objects of jealousy, they would often encounter ordeals unimaginable by the ordinary cultivator. At the end of the day, talents that fall are eventually forgotten by the masses. Not every sect among the major factions of Tianhuang mainland sent in sealers. Poison sect, the Fiend sect's Pure Maiden sect and Hidden Death sect did not send in sealers. To Hidden Death sect, the thousand-faced assassin would definitely be able to roam freely and undefeated across the ancient battlefield. Even if he failed in his assassinations, he could flee far away. Throughout history, there had been fiend heirs of hidden death sect who have failed in the ancient battlefield, but there was never one that was killed. Right now, there was no sealer from hidden death sect to take revenge for the death of the thousand-faced assassin. Successor did not stop after killing the thousand-faced assassin. Taking huge strides, he arrived before Zenith Sect's Baiyu in the blink of an eye and smiled sinisterly with a cruel glint. This is bad. He wants to silence me. Baiyu was scared out of his wits as his blood flowed so quickly that his heart almost exploded. When Successor shrank into a meatball earlier to avoid the 4 killing moves, Baiyu's questions were all answered. If one could shrink to that state, wouldn't it be extremely easy for this person to change his figure and alter his appearance? Despite the fact that he was faced with 8 other Paragons, this person ignored them and rushed right in front of him. Baiyu was even more certain now that this was the green-robed Cultivator. As the fiend heir of Zenith Sect, Baiyu was able to compose himself instantly and swung his Zenith Saber, slashing towards the incoming Successor while yelling, "You are battle!" Before Baiyu could complete his sentence, Successor roared. The distance between them was too close. Baiyu shuddered violently and he swallowed his words back from the shock. He lost his hearing and blood oozed out from his ears. The pain was so bad that his features were all contorted. Using his palm like a cleaver, Successor chopped down on the wrist that Baiyu was wielding his saber with. Snap! The sound of bones cracking rang out and his wrist was snapped. Sneering, Successor closed in and reached out, grabbing Baiyu by the throat and lifting the latter up. Wringing his arm, he gripped Baiyu's throat violently and shook. Crackle! Accompanied by a crisp sound, Baiyu's skeleton was shaken out of position by Successor. Even if he had immense strength, he wouldn't be able to use a single bit at this moment. Baiyu's entire body was flaying limply as Successor lifted him up. Because he was choked by the throat, his entire face was bloated and purplish such that he couldn't speak at all. How dare you! Stop! Don't! The first statement came from a blood-robed old man who was watching from afar. He was Zenith Sect's sealer. The second statement came from the few fiend heirs. The third statement came from Demonis G. Zenith Sect's sealer is already rushing over. If you kill him, the sealer will definitely attack you using his strength as a golden core. Don't be reckless. Demonis G tried persuading anxiously. Successor said nothing and merely shook his head. Notwithstanding the fact that Baiyu attacked him multiple times, the fact that Baiyu knew his identity meant that Successor could not let this guy survive. Demonis G's heart sank in dread. Junior, if you dare kill him, I'll make sure you are buried with him. Not far away, the blood-robed old man sped over while yelling. His killing intent was surging, as though a hurricane of blood was forming. Successor was unmoved despite hearing that as he merely looked at the old man coldly. On the other side, Overlord Palace's Pang Yu shouted grimly, "Mad Blade, let him go. Otherwise, you will be going against the fiend sects and will be forcing us to attack." Ha 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 ha. When he heard that, Successor looked up into the skies and roared in laughter. Looking at everyone with a condescending manner, he hollered, "The fiend sects are allowed to attack me but I'm not allowed to kill in return? Do you really think that makes sense?" The fiend heirs went silent. To begin with, you guys wanted to join forces with the Immortal and Buddhist sections. But now, you're just forcefully looking for an excuse. Successor sneered, "How hypocritical." Pang Yu's eyes flickered. Clearly, Successor was spot on. If not for the fact that it was the human emperor's palace that was before them, given the pride of the fiend sects, they would definitely not join forces with the Immortal and Buddhist sections. However, that was the inheritance of the human emperor. How could anyone in the world not be tempted? The combat strength that Successor displayed was way too terrifying and they had no other choice but to join forces to take him down. At that moment, Successor's cold voice sounded as he said everything word by word. "Since that's the case, I'll give you guys a reason to attack." Snap! Exerting force in his palm, Successor crushed Baiyu's throat instantly. The fiend heir of Zenith Sect was dead. Chapter 450. Suppressing Everyone. Chapter 450. Suppressing Everyone. Baiyu's death caused the vicinity of the human emperor's palace to descend into a grim silence. The cultivators who were watching afar were shocked as they looked at everything in disbelief. He was way too savage. That man did not even care about the threat of a sealer. Even though he had already offended the immortal and Buddhist sects, the successor of Divine Phoenix Island was still brazen and decisive in his kills, taking down 2 fiend heirs with utter dominance. When he said that he was going to give them a reason to attack, it meant that he did not fear the combined attacks of all the Paragons from the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects. Emperors were the strongest existences in Tianhuang mainland and had extraordinary bearings. Every single cultivator that was present right now, including the sealers, did not have the chance to come across an emperor before. However, at this moment, the same thought flashed through everyone's minds. Back when the emperors were at Foundation Establishment Realm, this should be how they were like. It's over. Her heart sank. With Bai Yu's death, there was now no way back, and Su Zimo was about to face an enraged sealer. Although he was close to the end of his life, he was still a golden core after all. The many paragons of the immortal Buddhist and fiend sects looked at Su Zimo as though they were looking at a dead man. Their gazes were filled with mockery and pity. There was no longer a need for them to make a move. Zenith Sect's sealer who had just entered the battlefield was more than enough to kill Su Zimo. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he looked at the incoming blood-robed old man. The scarlet demonic chi that was surrounding him did not diminish and his eyes shone fiercely. I don't care what you are. The blood-robed old man glared at Su Zimo with a heavy killing intent as his aura climbed. I'm going to kill you right now. Before he was finished with his statement, a saber appeared in the blood-robed old man's hand. Swash! Although it was only a supreme-grade spirit weapon, coupled with the strength of a golden core, a torrential saber beam filled with blood chi arrived before Su Zimo instantly. Ow! The sounds of ghosts wailing could be heard. It was as though a chilling mountain of corpses and a sea of blood had appeared right in front of Su Zimo. The next moment, to everyone's shock, Su Zimo actually took a step forward. Gripping his right fist, he punched fiercely towards the incoming saber. He truly doesn't know his limits. There's no choice. There's no time for him to retreat anyways. He might as well meet the attack and die a slightly more dignified death. The Paragons sneered. Demoness G turned her head away, as though she could not bear to continue watching. Boom! The fist and saber collided, letting out a resounding bang. Everyone was rooted on the spot as they looked at what happened in absolute disbelief. The bloody scene that everyone imagined did not play out. Su Zimo's right fist was not cut into 2 after meeting with a slash. After a short pause, Su Zimo let out a dull grunt and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying and landed on the ground far away, standing motionlessly as the scarlet demonic chi around his dissipated gradually. At the same time, a few ghastly cracks appeared behind the blood-robed old man. It was as though the void was being ripped apart as a chilling wind gusted. The dimensional tear. The blood-robed old man's eyes dimmed. That was the fate of a sealer. Since they broke the rules of the ancient battlefield, they had to be punished. However, he had no regrets since he was able to kill Su Zimo. Although Su Zimo managed to defend against the sharpness of the spirit saber, the blood-robed old man believed that there was no way a 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator could withstand the strength of a golden core. A powerful suction power arrived. The blood-robed old man was pulled into the dimensional tear uncontrollably and blood scars appeared on his face. He was about to be shredded by the dimension. All of a sudden, Su Zimo, who was initially sprawled on the ground, moved, coughed and rose. He was not dead. The blood-robed old man was agitated and his eyes were filled with indignance. His mouth was open, as though he wanted to say something. The next moment, with a bang, he vanished entirely, turning into a mist of blood with no corpse left. A moment later, the tears in the void closed gradually. Divine Phoenix Island's mad blade is truly frightening. Even the full attack of a sealer couldn't kill him. I think he's not far from death anyways. I reckon that his organs should be ruptured and he shouldn't have long to live. How did he manage to defend against that attack barehanded? I'm not sure. If Su Zimo was using any defensive spirit weapon, his palm would have shone with the light of its spirit patterns. However, when both parties clashed, everyone saw that Su Zimo was barehanded. The reason why he could defend against the Golden Core's saber was due to his bloodbone palm. If he had received the attack with his left hand, Suzumo's left arm would be crippled after the slash. However, although the bloodbone palm could defend against the sharpness of the spirit weapon, it could not block out the power of a Golden Core completely. That sort of power was annihilating for a Foundation Establishment cultivator. However, Suzumo's physique was way too strong and his regeneration capabilities were shocking. He had a body that was even more terrifying than pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Although his organs were shaken and he spat out a mouthful of blood, Suzumo's injuries were already mostly recovered within a couple of breaths. A mere sealer was not enough to injure Sealer's foundation. The sound of footsteps rustled as multiple figures grouped up around Suzumo once more. This time round, other than the 8 paragons of the immortal and Buddhist sects, even the remaining 3 fiend heirs of the fiend sects had closed in. All of them glared at Suzumo coldly, whipping out their weapons with killing intents on their faces. Apart from Demonist G, all the paragons were prepared to join forces to kill Suzumo. They wanted to take his life while he was at his weakest. However, all the paragons were wrong about one thing. Suzumo was not as severely injured as they had imagined. That minor injury was almost negligible for him. Furthermore, the attack of the sealer coupled with the alliance of the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects had thoroughly invoked Suzumo's feral instinct. There was no such thing as fairness in the cultivation world. The paragons of the major sects had formed an alliance and many of them had sealers of their sects backing them. However, Suzumo was alone without any help or sealer to protect him. Yet, the more that was the case, the more he wanted to fight. He believed that what Dai Yu imparted him was not inferior to the secret skills of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects. He believed that even if the paragons joined forces, they wouldn't be able to take him down. He believed that even without the backing of a major sect, he could break through everything and reach the peak. Fu. Suzumo laughed and surveyed his surroundings with a torrential battle intent. His eyes were filled with a demonic glint as he said slowly, Well. Since you guys want to join forces, I'll have to suppress all of you. Rubbish. Sword Sex Hang Chuyu sneered, Mad Blade. There's no need for you to put on a front. I don't believe you still have the strength to fight after receiving the full attack of a sealer. Cloud Rain Sex Shangguan Yu opened his folding fan and said sinisterly, Mad Blade, you're a demon. Even if the immortal Buddhist and fiend sects join hands, we're working together to take down a variant race and exact justice for the heavens. That's right. Ao Yuxiao said grimly, since we're not of the same race, you definitely harbor evil intents. A beast like you is something that's ought to be killed. Chapter 451. Invincible. He's invincible. Chapter 451. Invincible. He's invincible. Hee, I'm a beast and you want to kill me? Suzumo's blood chi gathered and exploded, causing scarlet demonic chi to surge into the air. He glared coldly at Ao Yuxiao before smirking and barking icily, I'll kill you first. Variant race? Exacting justice for the heavens? Those were nothing but excuses. Even if Suzumo did not take on his demon form, the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects would have formed an alliance still and killed him. Who wouldn't be tempted with the inheritance of the human emperor right before them? There was no such thing as fairness and justice in the cultivation world. It was way too common to see people killing others to steal their treasures. This was a cruel world that abides by the laws of the jungle. Similar to Tsonglang Mountain Range, it was the survival of the fittest. The hands of every cultivator were tainted with endless blood. The higher one's cultivation realm was, the more corpses would be stacked beneath their feet. Boom! Suzumo stomped on the ground and let out a deafening bang. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from the spot and sprinted towards Ao Yuxiao. It was too fast. A series of afterimages were formed in the void. Ao Yuxiao's expression changed starkly. Before he could react, a malefic aura that was suffocating had already reached him. A mighty figure arrived before him, shrouded with scarlet demonic chi. Those eyes were blindingly bright and shone with a demonic glint filled with killing intent. The purple chi that surrounded Ao Yuxiao was corroded by the thick demonic chi, melting swiftly like the way snow reacted to the scorching sun. Condense! Realizing that it was too late to dodge, Ao Yuxiao roared and crushed his protection talisman while conjuring a hand seal, causing the spirit qi in the air to boil. Spirit qi and his purple qi intertwined, condensing into a long sword with surging purple qi in front of Ao Yuxiao. It revealed its sharp edge and shot toward Su Zimo. Break it! Closing in, Su Zimo yelled and swung his arm. His fist was filled with green veins and his flesh flooded with blood, expanding swiftly as it descended like a gigantic seal. Boom! The gigantic seal collided against the purple sword and let out a resounding bang that was deafening. The purple sword was shattered by a single punch from Su Zimo. Ao Yuxiao shuddered and spat out a mouthful of blood, staggering backwards. Before he could catch his breath, his vision turned black and that fist-turned seal crushed down once more with endless ferocity. The second punch had arrived. Snap! The protection talisman was like paper against Su Zimo's demon form, shattering instantly against the punch. Poof! Immediately after, the punch descended and pummeled down on Ao Yuxiao's head, smashing it. The Paragon of Purple Firmament sect was dead. The sealers that were watching from the outer perimeter of the human emperor's palace were stunned, let alone the cultivators watching from afar. That was an 8-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. He could not last 3 moves against the successor of Divine Phoenix Island and was killed in 2 punches. Furthermore, prior to that, that person was just dealt a full blow by a sealer and was severely injured. How did he manage to produce such terrifying strength still? Snap! A thunderbolt descended onto Su Zimo's head. The eyes of Zephyr Thunder Palace's successor lit up as he roared in laughter. Haha, you won't last long now that you're struck by Zephyr Thunder Palace's secret skill. Normally speaking, the power of thunder was the most effective in countering demons and evil beings. It was just a pity that Su Zimo's bloodline possessed the power of thunder as well. When Zephyr Thunder Palace's secret skill surged into Su Zimo's body, it was devoured by his bloodline and his blood chi even rose because of that. Swash! Before Zephyr Thunder Palace's successor could finish laughing, Su Zimo's figure flashed and he arrived before the former almost instantly. That person was scared out of his wits and was frightfully pale. Even if one wasn't severely injured after being struck by Zephyr Thunder Palace's secret skill, they should be paralyzed by the effect of thunder. He had never come across someone like Su Zimo who was still so vigorous after being struck by thunder. He was completely unaffected. Fellow Taoists, save me! That person shrieked and swiftly withdrew a mirror from his storage bag. Injecting spirit energy into it, it expanded instantly and he held the mirror that was surging and crackling with lightning in front of him. Boom! Su Zimo punched the mirror. Crack, crack, crack. Instantly, the lightning dissipated as cracks formed on the mirror. The person's arms were completely snapped and he was sent flying by a tremendous force, crashing around the perimeter of the human emperor's palace. Blood flowed out continuously from his mouth and he had already fainted. Just as Su Zimo was about to close in and kill that person, the other Paragons arrived. Snowdrift Valley's secret skill, Chaos Essence Sect's flying sword, Monk Ju Chen's diamond staff, Hang Qiuyu's startling sword. Spirit arts filled the skies, sword chi streaked everywhere and resplendent talismans that were bedazzling all flew toward Su Zimo like a flurry of raindrops, almost engulfing him. Given the circumstances, Su Zimo was still composed and his eyes shone with a deep glint. Relying on his incredible spirit perception, Su Zimo maneuvered the flurry of intense attacks swiftly with nimble movement techniques. In order to evade attacks, Su Zimo's body would contort to weird degrees from time to time. It was far beyond what the Paragons knew. In a flash, Su Zimo charged in front of Clear Wind Temple's successor and punched through the latter's chest. The successor of Clear Wind Temple was dead. The moment these Paragons were closed in by Su Zimo, they could not withstand a single blow. After taking on his demon form, the burst of speed and power from Su Zimo was way too terrifying and he was able to sweep through any strong foes of the Foundation establishment realm. Secret skill, Illusory Fiend. Illusion Fiend Cult's heir shouted softly and extended his palm, shifting his fingers in front of Su Zimo's eyes. They moved mysteriously in a rhythm, playing out images that seemed illusory. The secret skill of Illusion Fiend Cult could bring out the evil thoughts within a cultivator's mind, causing them to form mental fiends that they cannot escape from before eventually turning into fiends themselves. However, it was a pity that Su Zimo's gaze was like a knife and his mind was resolute. He couldn't be tempted at all. In his eyes, the methods of the illusion fiend cult's heir were akin to child's play that were worthless. What nonsense secret skill is that? What an embarrassment. Buckling his knees, Su Zimo broke through all the illusions and smashed right into the illusion fiend cult's heir's chest. The illusion fiend cult's heir's body exploded into different parts in midair, dropping down as bloodied flesh and filling the air with a blood scent. Die! Pang Yu wielded his iron spear and burst forth with his power of bloodline. Spirit energy surged in his 8 spirit meridians and his power was at its limits as he pierced towards Su Zimo's head. Get lost! Hollering loudly, Su Zimo suddenly spun around and retaliated with a punch. His right hand that contained the bloodbone palm collided against the black iron spear like an indestructible force. Pang Yu could sense a massive amount of power surging over through his spear that was impossible to defend against. There was a momentary pause. Instantly, blood drained from Pang Yu's face as he yelled in pain. His palm split open with blood gushing out and his black iron spear was sent flying with Su Zimo's punch. The spear shot towards Cloud Rain's sex Shangguan Yu who was charging over. Shangguan Yu opened his folding fan and his expression changed the moment it made contact with the spear. Instantly, he twisted his body, trying to avoid the incoming spear. Although the spear was merely flying due to Su Zimo's punch, the power that it possessed was still something that Shangguan Yu could not withstand. Poof! Although he managed to avoid fatal damage, his shoulder was still pierced by the spear, revealing a hole the size of a fist with the bones surrounding that area smashed into bits. Pang Yu's arms were shaking uncontrollably and fell limply to both sides. With his aura completely gone, he fled while muttering with a quivering voice, "Invincible! He's invincible!" Even the most battle-hungry and untamed fiend heir of Overlord Palace had to bow down in the face of Su Zimo. Chapter 452. Number 1 Beneath Golden Court. Chapter 452. Number 1 Beneath Golden Core. Invincible. All the cultivators watching from afar had disbelief in their eyes and their mouths were agape for the longest time. With an invincible might, this man was single-handedly suppressing the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects. His grandeur was probably comparable to the ancient emperors. The sealers were enraged as they moved one after another, closing in towards the human emperor's palace. Their expressions were livid and their auras rose endlessly. Everyone had miscalculated the situation. None of them had expected that he could still produce such terrifying combat strength despite being struck by a full-powered attack from Zenith Sect's sealer. Although the battle against the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects sounded slow upon narration, everything happened within 10 breaths. By the time they reacted, some paragons had already died on the spot and a good half of them were severely injured. The losses were massive and it was too late for regrets. On the battlefield, a sword struck in a startling manner, emitting a chilling killing intent at an extremely fast speed that was almost instantaneous. Su Zimo had just punched Pang Yu with his right hand and was unable to retract it in time. As such, he could only grab the incoming sword with his left hand. Hang Qiuyu had long noticed that there was something odd about Su Zimo's right hand. It was indestructible and could even defend against perfect spirit weapons and the full-powered attack of a sealer. Earlier on, when Su Zimo used his right hand to repel Pang Yu's massive spear, it was further confirmation of Hang Qiuyu's theory. That was the reason why he waited till this moment to strike from the left-hand side. He wanted to avoid Su Zimo's right hand. The startling sword was a perfect-grade spirit weapon. Hang Qiuyu refused to believe that the body of a Foundation Establishment cultivator could defend against the edge of a perfect spirit weapon. Even the body of a pure-blooded ferocious beast could not reach such a level. However, there was no way he could have known that even pure-blooded ferocious beasts had to shy away from Su Zimo in his demon form. When he saw Su Zimo reaching out with his left hand, Hang Qiuyu's eyes flashed with a maniacal glint as he declared coldly, "Your left hand is mine." Heh! Su Zimo sneered. He gripped the startling sword with his left palm directly, and the sword let out a sinisterly cold aura. Instantly, sword chi burst forth and 5 spirit patterns shone endlessly. Buzz! Buzz! Sword chi streaked all around and flashes of blood appeared. A series of cuts appeared on Su Zimo's left hand. However, with the surge of his demonic chi, the cuts showed signs of recovery the moment they appeared. Upon seeing that, Hang Qiuyu's pupils constricted. What strong regeneration capabilities! The next moment, he discovered something even more frightening. After his startling sword was gripped by Su Zimo's hand, not only did it fail to slice his hand apart, it was even being restricted with its speed slowing down. Finally, it came to a complete halt an inch away from Su Zimo's head. Hang Qiuyu channeled his bloodline and his eyes were bloodshot as he circulated spirit energy fanatically. In fact, his dantian was already throbbing in slight pain and his arms were trembling. He was clearly at the limits of his power. As long as he could move an inch more, he could pierce Su Zimo's head. However, the startling sword refused to budge in Su Zimo's palm. Hang Qiuyu could clearly see that his startling sword had managed to cut Su Zimo's palm and blood was flowing everywhere. In fact, he could even sense the sluggish motion caused by the blade of the sword digging into Su Zimo's flesh and bone. However, all his effort was wasted because of that inch of difference. As the scarlet demonic chi surged, the sword chi around the blade was no longer as intense and sharp as before as it was slowly restricted and swallowed up. Su Zimo's blood spilled onto the startling sword. The spirit light on the sword gradually dimmed, as though it was being corroded by some sort of power. Pest! Hang Qiuyu's eyes were filled with fright when he saw the blood on his startling sword. Nobody could understand the fear he felt at that moment. What sort of bloodline did this man possess, such that he was even able to suppress the spirit light of a perfect spirit weapon? What did everything before him imply? It meant that if a perfect spirit weapon was soaked in the man's blood, it would be destroyed before long. There were countless legends in the cultivation world. In the ancient manuals of Sword Sect, there was a statement recorded that a single drop of blood from an immortal was more than enough to crush mountains, tunnel through the voids and kill ancient mighty figures. Naturally, Hang Qiuyu thought nothing of those legends. Even if they were immortals, could their bloodline possess such terrifying and exaggerated power? At this very moment, Hang Qiuyu realized that a person's bloodline could truly be cultivated to that level. The person before him was merely at Foundation Establishment realm and yet, his bloodline was already this powerful. If he were to truly become a mighty figure, patriarch or the immortals of the legends, a single drop of his blood would truly be enough to destroy a group of living beings. Right now, the startling sword was not even in Hang Qiuyu's control, let alone capable of crippling that man's palm. After it was tainted by Su Zimo's blood, Hang Qiuyu could clearly sense that the connection between him and the startling sword was getting fainter and was at the threat of severing at any moment. Ba! Monk Ju Chen wielded his diamond staff and shone with a golden luster. His eyes burned like a torch and he had already arrived, exuding an inviolable might. Demon! I'm here to purify you. You're not qualified. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as his right hand that was now free turned into a fist once more and welcomed the incoming diamond staff fiercely. Bang! Shaking violently, Monk Ju Chen's palm was split open and his diamond staff was sent flying. Gripping the startling sword with his left hand, Su Zimo took a huge stride with his right leg and leaned in. Before Monk Ju Chen could react, a figure slammed over towards his chest, leaning into him. Ugh! Monk Ju Chen's eyes widened. A terrifying power surged into his body through the other party and instantly, Monk Ju Chen's mind went blank and he was knocked flying. Bang! Landing heavily on the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood and his gaze dimmed. His protection talisman and the golden barrier that he created through the Diamond Sutra were all shattered as well. A series of cuts appeared densely on his face in a frightening manner. His flesh was ruptured. He didn't die. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. After he took on his demon form and his strength increased exponentially, that lean-in should have been enough to kill 10 Monk Ju Chens. Shifting his gaze, Su Zimo caught sight of the golden kasaya worn by Monk Ju Chen and he understood instantly. That golden kasaya must have been an extremely strong defensive spirit weapon. Otherwise, even his indestructible diamond body would have been smashed into a blood mist. Struggling to stand up, there was no aura left around Monk Ju Chen as he staggered to escape like a pathetic dog. Ha 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 ha! Su Zimo roared in laughter and eyed the wretched back view of Monk Ju Chen escaping while yelling, "You want to purify me with those skills? Go back and cultivate for another 10 years first." When he heard that, Monk Ju Chen's legs buckled and he nearly fell over. As the successor of Diamond Monastery and a paragon of the Buddhist sects, he had never endured such humiliation before. Filled with indignation and utterly humiliated, Monk Ju Chen was so pent up and upset that he spat out yet another mouthful of blood. Ugh! His chest was much relieved after he spat out that mouthful of blood, and he lamented deeply. That man is probably invincible among the Foundation establishment realm. At that moment, everyone realized that after this battle, as long as the successor of Divine Phoenix Island survives, he would be the number one beneath the Golden Core realm. Chapter 453. Another Dead Paragon. Chapter 453. Another Dead Paragon. The battle was not over yet. While Su Zimo sent Monk Ju Chen flying, he was still gripping the startling sword with his left hand and contending against Hang Qiuyu. The remaining 4 paragons attacked at the same time. Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han burst forth with her secret skill. Chaos Essence Sex Chen Yitzi sent his flying sword forward from a distance, not daring to close in. Wisdom Monastery Successor tapped his feet on the ground and closed in, conjuring a series of afterimages with both hands as he released an ultimate secret skill, Wisdom Palm Strike. Wisdom Palm Strike possessed the power to strike an object through a medium. If it landed on one's body, although no injuries would appear on the surface, the person's organs would be ruptured. It was extremely powerful. Even Monk Ju Chen, who cultivated the Diamond Sutra, did not dare to take on Wisdom Palm Strike head-on. Flinging around like a chopper, the palm's shadows were chaotic and it was difficult to identify the real one. Go! Formless Monastery Successor took out a copper alms bowl from his storage bag and injected spirit energy into it. It shone with a bedazzling golden light that was saintly and flawless. The copper alms bowl tilted down and a divine light flowed down towards Su Zimo's head with chanting of scriptures by the successor. The 4 paragons attacked at the same time, but Su Zimo only had his right hand available. Chaos Essence Sex Chen Yitzi's flying sword was the first to arrive and Su Zimo grabbed it with his right hand without hesitating. Frost Seal. The voice was icy cold as the surrounding temperature dipped. Su Zimo started freezing up from head to toe. Even the scarlet demonic chi that was surrounding him was freezing with a layer of frost. The frost sealed both spirit energy and blood chi. At the same time, the copper alms bowl arrived above Su Zimo's head and descended slowly with a terrifying might, as though it wanted to restrain him within it. Wisdom Monastery's Successor closed in, releasing a series of afterimages from his palm. Su Zimo was gripping the startling sword with his left hand while holding off Chen Yitzi's flying sword with his right. He had no hands left to spare. Coupled with Snowdrift Valley's secret skill and the descent of Formless Monastery's copper alms bowl, the combined burst power of multiple sources restricted him to his position, unable to move at all. Bang! 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 10 consecutive palm strikes landed on Su Zimo's body. With each palm strike, Su Zimo's body would shudder once as blood oozed from the corner of his lips. All the paragons were shocked upon seeing that. Divine Phoenix Island's successor was finally injured at this point of the battle. Immediately after, Hang Qiuyu and the others discovered that even so, the person remained upright and refused to go down. Instead, the coldness in his eyes was intensifying. That isn't even enough to kill him? Wisdom Monastery Successor finally experienced the same fear that Monk Ju Chen and the others felt. That person endured more than 10 wisdom palm strikes just like that. If it was anybody else, their organs would have exploded long ago with the palm strikes. However, this man seemed like he was fine and his gaze was fierce as ever. Among body tempering techniques, even the strongest ones of the human race, one could only swap blood through their marrow at the very most. It was difficult for them to cultivate the organs. However, the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness specialized in cultivating the organs. Su Zimo's organs were even stronger than most pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Otherwise, there was no way he would possess such frightening stamina to battle till now. After enduring more than 10 wisdom palm strikes, Su Zimo's organs were merely shaken, but his foundation was uninjured. Go down! Formless Monastery Successor hollered and shifted his hand and fingers rapidly, conjuring a spirit art that shot beams of spirit lights into the copper alms bowl. The copper alms bowl expanded rapidly and descended. Hang Qiuyu had no other choice but to relent his grip and abandon his startling sword. In the blink of an eye, the copper alms bowl that shone with a bedazzling radiance swallowed Su Zimo and locked him to the ground. Was it over? Upon seeing that, the sealers that were rushing over gradually slowed down. Amitba. Formless monastery successor chanted a Buddhist proclamation and walked towards the copper alms bowl that was now as tall as a human, saying in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoists, don't worry. All it takes is the time for one incense stick to burn for anyone that enters my copper alms bowl, even pure-blooded ferocious beasts, to melt into a puddle of water and die." The Paragons heaved a sigh of relief and their expressions relaxed significantly. Arriving before the copper alms bowl, Formless monastery successor lowered his head with a dignified expression while chanting continuously, causing the light around the alms bowl to shine brighter and brighter. Suddenly, a change happened. Boom! A gigantic bang sounded from within the copper alms bowl. Hang Qiuyu and the others were shocked. When they looked towards the copper alms bowl, their pupils constricted. A large dent the size of a fist appeared on the walls of the copper alms bowl. What sort of terrifying strength did he possess to be able to create a fist-sized dent on a spirit weapon of the Buddhist sects? The golden light around the copper alms bowl dimmed significantly. Bang! 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 Before everyone could reach, a series of sounds exploded like raindrops as fist-sized dents appeared all around the copper alms bowl one after another. There was a momentary pause. An extremely dangerous aura was being emitted from within the copper alms bowl. "Hurry, retreat!" The old monk of Formless Monastery hollered. Boom! There was a deafening noise that shook the mountains and earth. The gigantic copper alms bowl before them exploded into shards that flew in all directions with a massive shockwave. A tall and mighty figure appeared before everyone's eyes once more. Shrouded with demonic chi, his devilish eyes shone with a cold glint and he possessed a torrential aura. The first person to suffer was Formless Monastery successor, who was the closest to the copper alms bowl. Sent flying by the impact, he was pierced by the shards of the alms bowl and died on the spot. Su Zimo threw the startling sword that was in his hands at an extremely fast speed and instantly, it arrived before Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han. Condense! Ling Han was shocked and conjured a frost spirit mirror before her that was filled with chilling intent. Boom! The startling sword collided heavily against the frost spirit mirror. After a momentary pause, a series of cracks appeared on the spirit mirror. In the blink of an eye, it spread everywhere and shattered. Ling Han fell to the side, coughing fresh blood endlessly. Although it was just a simple attack, it possessed the terrifying power that Su Zimo produced after taking on his demon form, causing Ling Han to be severely injured. Bang! With a backhand slap, Su Zimo released a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the ground-rupturing palm, and collided intensely against the wisdom palm strikes of Wisdom Monastery successor. The successor's eyes widened in shock. He felt an extremely terrifying ripping force that surged over, threatening to create a ravine through the ground. Shing! A blood mist spewed out. The flesh on the Wisdom Monastery successor's arm was ripped off and his bones were completely broken as he flew off. In the blink of an eye, a Paragon died and 2 more had to leave the battle. Su Zimo's gaze shifted towards Chaos Essence Sect's Chen Yitzi, throwing the flying sword in his hands towards the latter. The sword streaked through the air and arrived instantly. There was no way Chen Yitzi would dare receive the attack as he shifted his footsteps, wanting to dodge to the side. Unexpectedly, Chen Yitzi's vision blurred and a tall figure had already arrived in front of him, exuding a terrifying might and endless killing intent. He had arrived almost at the same time as the sword. How fast? Chen Yitzi's eyelids twitched crazily. Boom! Arriving before Chen Yitzi, Su Zimo released the plow heaven stride and stomped heavily on the ground. Instantly, Chen Yitzi's legs buckled and he slowed down. The sword pierced through his body. Chen Yitzi's eyes went dim as a stream of blood spurted out from his chest, severing his life. The Paragon of Chaos Essence Sect was dead too. Chapter 454. Joining Forces to Kill. Chapter 454. Joining Forces to Kill. A resolute intent flickered through Hang Qiuyu's eyes as he turned to flee. Humph! Su Zimo harumphed coldly and caught up to Hang Qiuyu with a few huge strides. He extended his right hand and punched heavily towards the latter's back. Boom! A gigantic fist that resembled a large seal descended from the skies. Instantly, spirit chi exploded with a resounding bang in a terrifying manner. Hang Qiuyu caught sight of it from the side of his eyes and was terrified. If he was struck by that, he wouldn't survive even if he had 10 lives. Sword escape. Keeping his cool in the situation, Hang Qiuyu shouted softly and the sword chi within him surged out rampantly. Like an unsheathed sword, he flashed and turned into a streak of light, fleeing into the distance. His speed had already crossed the limits. This was a secret skill of sword sect that was similar to blood escape but lasted for a shorter time. Naturally, the side effects were much less as well. The gigantic seal above was about to descend. However, Hang Qiuyu's sudden speed burst made it such that the seal was about to miss. Hang Qiuyu was delighted. He could already see the sealers charging over. As long as he could withstand another few breaths, the situation would change entirely. At that moment, the sound of a bowstring being pulled sounded in Hang Qiuyu's ears. Pang, pang, pang. He turned slightly and looked towards his back. However, the sight of what was coming scared him out of his wits. Su Zimo was right behind him, shifting like a shadow as his eyes shone with a demonic glint. With a surging killing intent, the former's bones and tendons sounded and his arm expanded multiple inches under the intense stretching. How was that the arm of a human? It was clearly the trunk of a primordial divine elephant. Tearing through the firmament, it seemed like it could smash the stars and destroy the void as it caught up to Hang Qiuyu and slammed down heavily. There was nowhere to escape. In the blink of an eye, Hang Qiuyu dug out another shiny silver circlet from his storage bag and twisted his body, pushing it fiercely towards the incoming fist. Boom! A deafening bang that shook the heavens and earth sounded. As though he was struck by lightning, the sounds of bones cracking could be heard coming from Hang Qiuyu's entire arm. Poof! He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying, his entire face palely yellow. Although he managed to hang on to his life with the use of a connate spirit weapon, he fainted on the spot and laid motionlessly on the ground in a bad condition. By now, the Paragons of the immortal Buddhist and Fiend sects were dead, injured or have escaped. Demoness Ji was the only one standing not far away watching everything in astonishment. She finally understood why Su Zimo had to alter his appearance and even transform his body so as to hide his identity. After this battle, there was a high chance that he would offend the entire cultivation world. Disregarding those that were severely injured and crippled, there were 7 Paragons who died in his hands. At that moment, Demoness Ji did not know that with malevolent Earth Sect's Xueqi who died in the fog valley outside Xiantian City, there were a total of 8 Paragons who died in Su Zimo's hands. Once his identity was exposed, there was a high chance he would be hunted by the experts of the immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects. Although the world was huge, there wasn't a place where he was absolutely safe. Of course, right now, the most important thing for Su Zimo to consider was how he was going to survive. The sealers had already arrived beneath the human emperor's palace. Among them, Sword Sect and Snowdrift Sect sealers took their respective successors and left the battlefield first to try and heal them. However, 5 sealers filled with killing intents and exuded terrifying auras had already surrounded Su Zimo. They were from Purple Firmament Sect, Clear Wind Temple, Illusion Fiend Cult, Chaos Essence Sect and Formless Monastery. Since their Paragons were already dead, they had no other choice but to make a move and kill Su Zimo. Your embarrassment has turned into anger. Su Zimo laughed and surveyed his surroundings with mocking eyes. Since they were no match for me one-on-one, they came at me together. After they were defeated, even their sealers are joining forces. Fufufu. That's all there is to the 3 great factions. Bastard of Divine Phoenix Island, your provocations mean nothing to us. You are still going to die. Purple Firmament Sect sealer had a calm tone and he was unmoved. Heh! Su Zimo sneered, old asshole, you think too highly of yourself. I merely wanted to see how shameless cultivators of Purple Firmament Sect were. Bastard, since you're not from our race, you are our common enemy. Clear Wind Temple sealer waved the horsetail whip in his hands and hollered. Amitba. Formless Monastery sealer said grimly, patron, You have no one but your stubbornness to blame for your plight today. A tall tree attracts strong winds. That has always been the case throughout history. Hee hee. Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer laughed sinisterly. You guys from the Immortal and Buddhist sects are truly hypocritical, always finding all sorts of excuses for your actions. I'll let you understand today that the reason why we're joining hands is to murder you because you are talented. Murder me? Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and his blood chi exploded. Despite the fact that he was facing 5 sealers, his aura climbed once more as he yelled, "Let's see if you guys have what it takes." He was looking down on 5 golden cores as a Foundation Establishment cultivator. Regardless of the outcome of the battle, his words alone were enough to set the cultivators watching from afar in shock with racing hearts. At that moment, all the Paragons seemed absolutely inferior. Bang! Boom! Boom! Right then, a sudden sound came from within the human emperor's palace that caused everyone's hearts to skip a beat. Everyone subconsciously looked up. A gigantic cave appeared at the center of the human emperor's palace. It was pitch black, mysteriously dark, and let out waves of terrifying might. The entrance to the human emperor's palace had appeared. This meant that the human emperor's palace has already silently acknowledged someone as a successor. Attack! The 5 sealers shouted and attacked together with a tacit understanding. None of them could sit by and watch Su Zimo enter the human emperor's palace to receive the inheritance. They had to kill him right here. If Su Zimo were to die, the human emperor's palace would either disappear or pick a new successor. There was no way the human emperor's palace would leave its inheritance to a corpse. Die! Purple Firmament Sex Sealer roared and waved his sleeves, causing the endless purple chi that surrounded him to condense into a gigantic sword that shot toward Su Zimo. The purple sword tore through the air and created a gigantic ravine on the ground, causing the earth to toss over and dust to fly everywhere. Su Zimo had already attained lesser mastery of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness's orifice clearing section. He was also at 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment realm. Be it his immortal or demonic cultivation, he had not reached their limits, and even in his demon form, his strength was not enough to take on golden cores. If he was faced with a single old sealer, he might have a shot at victory. However, there was no way he could win if all 5 of them attacked at the same time. He had to endure through it. At this life and death moment, Su Zimo's powers were already channeled to their limits and his bloodline surged while his tendons and bones rang together. Demonic chi rumbled around him, forming menacing demon beasts that were lifelike and filled with killing intent. There was a wild bovine with raised horns, a bear demon that was roaring while standing upright, a coiling anaconda, a demon ape with large arms. Roar! Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo puffed his chest and paused for a moment before letting out an earth-shaking roar in the direction of Purple Firmament Sect Sealer. The ancient demons surrounding him roared at the same time. The voids shook, contorting the entire space itself. Su Zimo was like the king of all demons. In the blink of an eye, the world changed. Chapter 455. About to die? Chapter 455. About to die. Even the 5 sealers felt a chill upon sensing the malefic aura let out by Su Zimo. This lad must not survive. He was already able to suppress the paragons of the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects at 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment. If he were to obtain the human emperor's inheritance. It was hard to imagine, and they did not dare to either. The stronger the strength and potential displayed by Su Zimo, the more resolved the 5 sealers were to kill him. Scarlet demonic chi rumbled and the lifelike ancient demons charged while howling, biting and slamming towards the incoming purple sword. Bang! 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 The sword tore through the air with endless might and a terrifying sharp edge, defeating the ancient demons that were formed with demonic chi one after another. The purple chi and demonic chi, 2 different powers, collided and corroded one another endlessly. With the dissipation of each demon beast, the scarlet demonic chi surrounding Su Zimo would dim slightly. The purple sword's power was also clearly not as intense as it was initially as its light dimmed. Boom! It was yet another deafening sound. The purple sword collided against the last demon beast. All the demon beasts and demonic chi had dispersed and the purple sword turned into streams of purple chi that returned to the world as well. Su Zimo managed to defend against the full-powered attack of a sealer. Furthermore, he defended against it without taking any damage. Su Zimo panted heavily. This time round, he had expended almost all of his strength. Ever since he arrived, he had been fighting. If not for the fact that he possessed shocking stamina and ferocious blood chi due to his constant cultivation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, he would have been exhausted long ago. Right now, after defending the sword of purple firmament sex sealer, Su Zimo felt weakness surge into his head and his arms and feet were powerless. He was thoroughly exhausted. If not for the fact that he was constantly surrounded by strong foes, he would have collapsed long ago. After invoking the power of a golden core, there was only a single outcome for a sealer. They would be mercilessly devoured by a dimensional tear in the ancient battlefield. A series of rips appeared behind purple firmament sex sealer as a sinister wind howled in a mysterious manner. Looking over, Su Zimo sneered with mockery in his eyes. Purple firmament sex sealer grit his teeth in indignance. Bastard, you don't have to be smug. It won't be long before you'll be joining me. Ha 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 arg. It was a tragic cry. His body was shredded into pieces by the dimension, turning into a blood mist as he was devoured cleanly without a corpse left. A moment later, the dimension stabilized and the tear repaired itself. Swash! A silver beam descended from the skies in a frightening manner. Clear Wind Temple Sealer struck with his horsetail whip and 3,000 silver threads extended countlessly, turning into a massive silver rod that slammed down at Su Zimo's head violently. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and reached out with his right hand, grabbing the incoming silver rod. Bang! There was a dull sound of defeat when the rod and hand collided. Although he managed to grip the silver rod tightly, the flesh on his palm had already exploded and a frightening power surged into his body. His organs were ruptured upon receiving the impact and cracks appeared on the surface. Poof! Su Zimo's gaze dimmed and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Thankfully, I have this bloodbone palm. Otherwise, my arm would have been destroyed with this sealer's attack. He lamented internally in gratefulness. Ha, naive. Suddenly, Clear Wind Temple's sealer chuckled with a look of ridicule. Su Zimo's expression changed. Suddenly, the silver rod spread open from his palm and the 3,000 threads whipped him on the back viciously. Piak! Flashes of blood appeared, accompanied by the sounds of bones cracking. Su Zimo's face turned pale as his knees buckled, almost kneeling on the ground. The change was extremely sudden. The horsetail whip seemed like it was alive and sentient and shifted between flexibility and toughness instantly. Su Zimo's back was whipped into a mess of flesh and blood, as though countless knives were gliding across. The fabric of his torn clothes stuck onto the surface in a frightening manner. His collarbone was broken and hung out in an exposed manner, looking extremely shocking. At that moment, Su Zimo experienced another terrifying aspect of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Its vitality was shocking. If it was any other cultivator or living being, they would have long died after their organs were ruptured and they suffered such severe impacts. However, at this moment, Su Zimo could still stand upright. He could sense his injuries healing slightly with every single breath, except that it was at an extremely slow speed due to his serious injuries. You're still not dead. Clear Wind Temple Sealer's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at Su Zimo, who stood upright slowly. His attack was more than enough to split the body of any Foundation Establishment cultivator. However, he did not expect Su Zimo to stand up once more. What a pity, I just need a little more. The sealer sighed indignantly. However, he no longer had a chance. A dimensional tear appeared and devoured him straight. Even his horsetail whip was shred into pieces. Buzz! Almost at the same time, the sound of a sword buzzing rang out. Go! Chaos Essence Sex Sealer had attacked, pointing his flying sword towards Su Zimo. A streak of light appeared instantly. It was the simplest as well as the most effective killing move of cultivators. The moment Chaos Essence Sex Sealer struck, Su Zimo sensed a warning in his mind. Without hesitating, in a flash, Su Zimo grit his teeth and dodged to the side. Poof! A stream of blood spurted out. He was still a step too slow. The sword pierced his left chest and shot out of his body. Although it missed his heart, a penetration through his lung was enough to be fatal. Instantly, Su Zimo had difficulty breathing. He coughed endlessly, as though there was a fire burning in his throat, and his body convulsed for a split moment. This time round, the injury was way too severe. This was the first time he had experienced such a serious injury throughout his cultivation journey. Although his regeneration capabilities were strong, there was a limit to them. It was unknown if he could recover from an injury as such. Furthermore, this was in the ancient battlefield and nobody would accord him the chance to do so. Buzz! In midair, the flying sword turned and retraced its path right after penetrating Xueqi's chest. It was a clear sign of how advanced the Sealer of Chaos Essence sect was in his sword-handling skills. An unprecedented feeling of death arrived. Even without his spirit perception, Xueqi knew that he was extremely close to death and would definitely die if he could not dodge that sword. Bang! Stomping on the ground, he exerted his final bit of strength and leaped forcefully to the side. Shing! A flash of blood appeared and a throbbing pain that struck his marrow surged from his abdomen. The blood drained from Xueqi's face as his knees buckled, almost collapsing onto the ground. By now, he was completely exhausted and was severely injured. It was extremely lucky that he was able to avoid fatal damage. That sword sliced a bloody hole through his abdomen. Xueqi clutched it with his hands immediately to stop his intestines from spilling out. Fresh blood gushed out, seeping through his fingers and flowing down, slowly soaking his clothes with a heavy stench. In the blink of an eye, he was already filled with blood. His head was spinning and he swayed while he felt his vitality leaving his body in an irreversible manner. Am I about to die? Xueqi murmured softly. Suddenly, his vision blurred, as if a bloody figure appeared with an unparalleled might. Even after many years, that figure remained etched in his memories. There was no way for him to erase that scene and it felt clear as though it was yesterday. Chapter 456. Forgive my inability to comply. Chapter 456. Forgive my inability to comply. Nobody thought that Divine Phoenix Island would have produced a paragon as such. Yet, it's a pity that he has to die beneath the human emperor's palace. He died a worthwhile death trading the lives of 7 other paragons and a couple of sealers. The cultivators watching that blood-stained and swaying figure from afar had complicated expressions as they discussed in hushed whispers with looks of pity. That lone figure looked pitiable and tragic. The cultivators knew that Divine Phoenix Island's successor was about to die and no one could save him. Xueqi was indeed in a disastrous situation. His left chest was punctured with blood gushing out, his collarbone was smashed and broken while his abdomen had a frightening wound that was so bad his intestines would have spilled out if he wasn't clutching it with his hands. Xueqi could feel his vitality draining from him. Fresh blood was still flowing. His injuries were not showing any signs of healing or recovery. This meant that his injuries had already exceeded the limits of his regeneration capabilities. The sealers of Formless Monastery and Illusion Fiend Cult had yet to make their moves. Even if they were to stand by the sidelines and watch idly, before long, he would still run out of blood and die all the same. Xueqi's head was giddy and his vision blurred, as if a familiar blood-colored figure flashed before him. Miss Dai. Instinctively, he called out softly. There was no response. The figure in front turned slightly and raised her brows, glancing at him with endless worry and pity. A faint fragrance wafted over and Xueqi was momentarily invigorated as he struggled to open his eyes and look over. After a moment of daze, he opened his mouth but failed to say anything. His head slumped down with evident disappointment. It was not Dai Yu. It was Demonis G. He had lost too much blood and his vision was blurry. Coupled with the fact that he had been yearning about her for years, Xueqi mistook Demonis G's pink-colored dress as a blood-red color. She has already left long ago and won't be coming back. I still couldn't catch up to her in the end. There's no more chance left. Heis. Xueqi sighed deeply and his body swayed. His eyelids were heavy and gradually, his consciousness was gone as he fell into the endless abyss. Suddenly, a voice sounded in his ears, jolting Xueqi's mind and pulling him back from the abyss of death. Seniors, please let him off. It was Demonis G's voice and she was right in front of him. Demonis, get lost. Formless Monastery's sealer walked over slowly and hollered with a terrifying aura. Even if you guys don't attack, He won't be able to survive. What's so bad about leaving him with a complete corpse? Demoness G did not leave and her voice sounded once more. The Buddhist sex advocate kindness, so why are you so bent on killing him? The only way to ensure that nothing goes wrong is to kill him personally. Formless Monastery's sealer was unmoved and he said with a shimmering gaze, Demoness, if you don't get lost, I'll kill you together with him. A moment later, Demoness G's voice sounded once more. Although it was calm and firm, it was shocking. Forgive my inability to comply. Those words revealed a determination. It was an unwavering conviction to not back off despite knowing that it would result in death. Suzumo's expression changed. She was facing a sealer. This was a sealer who was completely enraged and could kill her with a single move. Suzumo did not expect that given the circumstances, Demoness G would stand forth and defend him with reckless abandon unyieldingly. What a foolish woman. His lips shifted and his voice was as soft and inaudible as a mosquito. Very well then. Formless Monastery's sealer nodded expressionlessly as killing intent surged in his eyes. Since you wish to die, I'll fulfill your wishes. Boom! He channeled his golden core and burst forth with his full power. It was an instant attack with a massive rise in aura. Formless finger. Reaching out with his finger, he tapped in Demoness G's direction. Instantly, heaven and earth shook. How was that a finger? It was clearly a heavenly piercing pillar that streaked through the void with unbridled might, charging over as though it wanted to crush Demoness G into smithereens. Suzumo clenched his teeth and wanted to block the move for Demoness G. However, he was too severely injured and he had no strength left to budge. Demoness G blinked her eyes and a ripple appeared in her beautiful eyes, sending forth a bewitching beam that entered the eyes of Formless Monastery sealer. Removing her veil, Demoness G revealed a flawless face and smiled charmingly. It was a charm that could topple the world. Even the cultivators who were watching from afar were stunned and drooled with agape mouths, let alone Formless Monastery sealer who was right opposite. She did not merely use the bewitching eye. That was the limit of the pure Maiden Sutra's powers. Although Formless Monastery sealer was a golden core, he had not cultivated the secret skills of Diamond Monastery and was unable to counter the pure Maiden Sutra perfectly. His heart wavered for a moment and the power of Formless finger weakened. Go! At the same time, Demoness G sent forth a ribbon that shone with a bright spirit light, colliding against the incoming Formless finger. Bang! There was a deafening sound. Demoness G's expression changed starkly as her petite figure shuddered, stumbling in retreat repeatedly. With every single step back, she would spit out a mouthful of blood that was extremely striking. Not everyone could endure the full-powered attack of sealers like Suzumo. If not for the fact that Formless Monastery sealer was distracted and the power of Formless finger was diminished, Demoness G would have been torn apart and died. Even so, by the time she staggered backwards to Suzumo's side, she was already severely injured and on the brink of death. A series of sinister tears appeared behind Formless Monastery sealer. Humph! With a grim expression he sneered, I'll give you guys a large gift before my death so that you two lovebirds can go to hell together. Before his sentence was finished, a stream of fire burst forth from the Formless Monastery sealer's finger and arrived before the two of them. His flames were fiery red and there was even a shade of gold mixed within, letting off a terrifying aura. True fire. True fires came above level 3 spirit fires. Only golden cores who possessed fire spirit roots could cultivate true fires that could incinerate all Foundation Establishment cultivators and even burn pure-blooded ferocious beasts at Foundation Establishment realm to ashes. Suzumo's eyes twitched furiously. He was a weapon refinement master as well and had mastery over flames. Naturally, he knew of how powerful true fires were. Previously, none of the sealers produced true fires because they were not cultivators with fire spirit roots. Heaving a deep breath of air, Suzumo used all his might to push away Demoness G who was in front of him while bellowing deeply, "Get away!" Swoosh! The flames landed on Suzumo and surged, burning his entire body. In the blink of an eye, he was a man engulfed in flames. Chapter 457. Hand of a Divine Spirit. Chapter 457. Hand of a Divine Spirit. Zimo hunched over with his eyes tightly shut. He was in immeasurable pain as his throat let out a hoarse cry. The true fire burned furiously and his body convulsed. Even his flesh sizzled with crackling sounds as his flesh was burnt black in a terrifying sight. In the fire, Zimo's face was faintly visible, and he was in such deep pain that his features were contorted to an unrecognizable degree. Demoness G's heart ached when she saw the state he was in and her eyes misted. Cough. Her internal injuries acted up and she coughed out another 2 mouthfuls of black blood. There were even pieces of her ruptured organs and it looked terrifying. To think that I would still end up dying here. Demoness G's eyes dimmed and she sounded wistful. Her organs were severely damaged after receiving the full blow of a sealer and her vitality was rapidly draining. Unless she was in possession of some supreme methods, she would be dead for sure. However, in the ancient battlefield, golden cores were already the mightiest figures. How could anyone save her? How could that be? Suddenly, a soft exclamation filled with disbelief sounded not far away. It was the voice of illusion fiend cult sealer. Instinctively, Demoness G followed the sealer's gaze and looked towards Zimo once more. At that moment, the true fire burning him had grown much smaller than before, and was even showing signs of extinguishing. Demoness G's mouth was slightly agape and her eyes were filled with shock. Although Zimo was almost charcoal black by now and was billowing with smoke, the flames surrounding him were indeed getting weaker. Or rather, they were reversing. The fiery flames trembled slightly, as if they were directed towards Zimo's right hand by some mysterious force, entering his blood-bone palm. Apart from Zimo, no one else knew or could explain what was happening to him. Initially, his injuries were way too severe that they had exceeded his regeneration capabilities. As such, he could not recover and was bleeding the entire time. If not for the true fire, he would have died of blood loss. However, the flames of the true fire had cauterized his wounds and stopped the bleeding temporarily, saving his life. At the same time, a mysterious change was happening to the blood-bone palm under the burn of the true fire. It was as though a seal had been undone, summoning a hidden power within Zimo that was devouring the true fire on him without any care. Before the true fire could threaten Zimo, the blood-bone palm had already consumed a large portion of it. It could be said that through some freak turn of events, the true fire had instead saved Zimo's life. A terrifying aura was growing, shrouding around the blood-bone palm. Ta, ta, ta. The sound of footsteps filled with killing intent surged over in a suffocating manner. Demoness G's heart sank. Formless Monastery Sealer was already devoured by the Dimensional Tear and Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer was the only one left. The flames on Zimo's body had yet to extinguish and he stood on the spot like a burnt charcoal. His eyes were shut and his aura was weak. Demoness G grit her teeth and pushed herself up with her trembling arms. After multiple failures, she finally struggled to stand up before staggering in front of Zimo. Although it was a simple motion, she had expended the final bit of her strength. Her body swayed unsteadily, as if a single gust of wind could knock her over. However, when she raised her head and looked towards Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer who was striding over murderously, her eyes were filled with unprecedented resolve. She knew that her injuries were already beyond the point of no return, but it was not the case for Zimo. The Human Emperor's Palace. That might be Zimo's only chance. Multiple signs had already indicated that Zimo was this generation's successor for the Human Emperor's Palace. As long as he entered it, he might be able to survive. Of course, that was only a possibility. Nobody knew what was inside the Human Emperor's Palace. The footsteps vanished. Arriving in front of Demoness G, Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer paused with a cold expression. The way you're protecting him. Don't tell me that this bastard is your tripod. Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer asked slowly. The way he looked at Demoness G was filled with mockery and ridicule. So what if he is? Her face turned darker and grimmer and the vitality exuding from her body was almost negligible. If not for her thread of determination that was keeping her going, she would have collapsed long ago. Ha 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 ha. It was as tough the sealer of Illusion Fiend Cult had just heard the greatest joke in the world. Even the sealers of Overlord Palace and Cloud Rain's sect frowned, looking at Demoness G in disbelief. Foolish, how foolish. After laughing, he shook his head regrettably. To think that this generation's pure maiden of the fiend sex would be a lovelorn fool, picking a cultivator as a tripod. How laughable. Demoness G pursed her lips and her eyelids were getting heavier. She could no longer hear the sealer clearly. It merely felt as though her ears were buzzing with noises close and far as her consciousness faded. The reason why you're fighting with your life is to buy time for this little bastard to enter the human emperor's palace. Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer sneered, however. It's a pity that both of you will have to die. Today, I'll kill you so that you don't bring about disgrace for pure maiden sect as well as the fiend sex. The moment he said that, the sealer's eyes shone with killing intent and he whipped out a shimmering flexible sword from his waist. Swoosh! With a fling, the sword turned straight. Even against two helpless Foundation establishment cultivators who were on the brink of death, the sealer had no intention of showing mercy as he burst forth with his power as a golden core and thrust forward. That attack was enough to skewer the both of their heads together. The sword chi was extremely cold and possessed wild might. Demoness G could hold on no longer as she collapsed to the side. Suddenly, an arm reached out and held up her body. The next moment, Demoness G caught sight of a figure through her blurred vision. Although he was burnt charcoal black and was disfigured, she could recognize him. Those eyes burned with a bloodshot gleam as though they wanted to devour someone. Suddenly, Suximo reached out with his right arm. Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer's eyes constricted in shock. There was no flesh on his palm and it was just a scarlet bone that was burning with thin flames, emitting a terrifying aura that seemed as though it could incinerate the heavens and oceans, annihilating all living beings. It was as though it was the hand of a divine spirit that let out a shuddering aura. Even the sealers who were watching from nearby as well as the cultivators watching from afar felt chills run down their spines, let alone Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer. Some of the cultivators could not endure that might and fell to the ground on the spot, shivering in fear. A feeling of inferiority grew in the hearts of many cultivators. The blood-bone palm reached out for the flexible sword. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. Before it could reach the blood-bone palm, the sword was melted into liquid steel and dripped onto the ground. A perfect-grade spirit weapon was destroyed just like that. The sealer had nowhere to run with the dimensional tear appearing in his back. In his eyes, he could only see a burning palm arriving with a flame that grew more and more intense. Chapter 458, Divine Phoenix Bone. Chapter 458, Divine Phoenix Bone. Right in front of everyone, that burning blood-bone palm penetrated the Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer's body with ease. It did not pause at all, similar to how a blazing steel sword would pierce a thin veil. In the blink of an eye, Illusion Fiend Cult Sealer was devoured by the flames. The next moment, he turned into ashes. A golden core was incinerated to ashes by that terrifying flame in less than a second without any corpse left. Complete silence ensued within 1,000 meters from the human emperor's palace. All the cultivators felt an inexplicable sense of repression as their chests stuffed up, making breathing difficult. "Look!" someone from the crowd exclaimed. Without the need for any reminders, everyone's gazes landed on that blood-bone palm. At that moment, the void around the blood-bone palm began to distort after being burned by the intense flames. A series of tears appeared, gusting with sinister winds. The rules of the ancient battlefield had been violated, triggering a dimensional tear. Pest! Everyone gasped. This meant that the flames on that palm had already reached the level of a golden core's power. A sinister aura gushed out from the dimensional tear. The flames on the blood-bone palm flickered against the sinister wind, lasting for a moment before finally extinguishing. Right after, all the cultivators watched with alarmed gazes. The dimensional tears that appeared around the blood-bone palm devoured it but spat it back out. It was spat out intact. The ripping power of the dimensional tear was incomparably strong to begin with and could tear the bodies of golden cores or even nascent souls apart. The moment one was dragged away by the dimensional tear, they would endure an incredibly horrific wild current of the void. Even nascent souls or void reversions would have their essence spirits destroyed without any corpses remaining. Legend has it that only mighty patriarchs could endure the wild currents of the void and travel through it freely. Yet, the dimensional tear could not devour that blood-bone palm. After it was taken in and washed by the wild currents, it was still intact. What exactly was that? That was not the bone of a human being. Divine Phoenix Island Successor, Bloodbone Palm Flames. All the clues seemed to lead towards a certain truth. Could the legend be for real? Sword Sex Sealer shuddered uneasily, as though he had just recalled something frightening. What legend? The other sealers looked towards him one after another. Do you guys know of the origin of Divine Phoenix Island? Sword Sex Sealer asked instead. Another sealer replied with a frown. Initially, Divine Phoenix Island was just a lone island overseas. Legend has it that in an unknown era long ago, the skies rained with fire and the firmaments collapsed. Among that, a pure-blooded divine phoenix's corpse landed on that island. Thereafter, the island was named as the Divine Phoenix Island. At that point, the sealer suddenly paused. As though he recalled something as well, he was shocked and asked slowly, "You mean to say that legend was too long ago and has always been spread through the mortal world? It was created by storytellers. There's no way it can be true, right?" Another sealer refused to believe it. Phoenixes were definitely divine spirits that were as strong as perfected immortals. In the cultivation world, there had never been accurate records about the existence of divine phoenixes on Tianhuang mainland. Nobody had seen a pure-blooded phoenix, and the only things left were figments of the legends. Prior to this, if anyone said that there was a pure-blooded living being in the world that possessed a might comparable to a perfected immortal, nobody would believe it. But now, the sealers present went silent. Suddenly, Overlord Palace's sealer said, "In the ancient manuals of the fiend's sex, there's a legend about the phoenix race. It said that the phoenix race is a mighty race that's even comparable in strength to the dragons. They wield the strongest and most frightening flames in the universe and can incinerate all living beings. Male phoenixes are called Fengs while female phoenixes are called Huangs. Pure-blooded phoenixes, also known as undying divine phoenixes, are reborn through nirvana each time they incinerate themselves and become even stronger. Therefore, in Tianhuang mainland, be it in the cultivation or mortal world, there's always the saying of a phoenix undergoing nirvana for a rebirth through flames. That saying is an explanation of the capabilities of the divine phoenixes." Another sealer asked, "What's the difference between the two?" Overlord Palace's sealer replied, "The ancient manuals recorded that phoenixes would always leave something behind during each rebirth. When the undying Feng is bathed in flames, he leaves behind a drop of divine phoenix essence blood. When the undying Huang is bathed in flames, she leaves behind a piece of divine phoenix bone." At that point, everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. They made the connection between this person from the Divine Phoenix Island and his blood-bone palm with the terrifying flame that was burning on it. They were close to the truth. You mean to say that his right hand is actually a piece of the Divine Phoenix's bone? A sealer exclaimed. If that deduction was correct, that Divine Phoenix bone would be the greatest treasure throughout Tianhuang mainland or even the cultivation world and was irreplaceable. In that case, it would naturally explain why the dimensional tear was unable to devour that bone and why the wild currents in the void could not destroy it. It would make sense for the Divine Phoenix bone to be an immortal object. Even a mighty patriarch would be tempted to get his hands on it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sealers had a tacit understanding and set their sights on Su Zimo's right hand. They could not conceal the greed in their eyes. All of them were golden cores reaching the end of their lifespans. Now that they were sent into the ancient battlefield with the successors of their respective sects, it was partly due to the threat that they would be able to provide. On the other hand, all of them harbored thoughts of seeking out opportunities or treasures to increase their lifespans so that they could continue cultivating and break through to the nascent soul realm. Since the Divine Phoenix bone was an object left behind by the undying Huang's rebirth through nirvana, it would definitely possess unimaginable divine power, and if they could get their hands on it, they might be able to extend their lives. Although Su Zimo was able to kill illusion fiend cult Sealer with a bloodbone palm, his internal injuries had yet to heal up and his vitality was still draining, almost completely depleted. Demoness G was in a similar condition. To everyone, Su Zimo and Demoness G were two dead people. All they had to consider was how they were going to get their hands on the Divine Phoenix bone in the ensuing fight after severing Su Zimo's hand. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the human Emperor's palace's entrance, descending upon Su Zimo. A massive power sucked Su Zimo, causing him to rise slowly. Go on. If you manage to survive, I hope, You can still remember me. Demoness G tilted her head and leaned in Su Zimo's embrace like a weak girl. Although her eyes were filled with sadness and reluctance, she faked a smile nevertheless. Chapter 459. Human Emperor's Palace's Compromise. Chapter 459. Human Emperor's Palace's Compromise. Su Zimo did not say anything, but he did not let go. Throughout history, there would only be a single successor chosen for the Human Emperor's Palace's appearance. Right now, as long as Su Zimo let go of Demoness G, he would be able to enter the Human Emperor's Palace rightfully. However, he knew that if he were to let go, she would definitely have no chance of surviving. Su Zimo did not care about the relationship between Demoness G and Ji Yao Xueqi or ponder about what it meant to be her tripod. The only thing he knew was that if Demoness G had not sacrificed herself to buy time for him earlier on, he would have been killed by the sealers of Formless Monastery and Illusion Fiend cult and would not have lasted till now. He held on to Demoness G obstinately and refused to let go. To the many cultivators, this was a choice that seemed foolish, even stupid. It was precisely because of this reason that the both of them stopped in midair during the rise, unable to head up or down. It was an undeniable rule that the Human Emperor's Palace would only select a single successor. Right now, Su Zimo's choice was challenging the rule of the Human Emperor's Palace, challenging the might of the Human Emperor himself. The sealers were delighted upon seeing that. If Su Zimo were to enter the Human Emperor's Palace successfully, they would miss their chance of seizing the Divine Phoenix Bone. How foolish! He doesn't know what's good for him. A cultivator sneered. Another cultivator shook his head and sighed. To think that Mad Blade would be such a sentimental man. Isn't that right? Not many people would have the courage to make such a choice. If he entered the Human Emperor's Palace, not only would he be able to survive, he would also be able to obtain the Human Emperor's inheritance. Who could resist such a temptation? Snowdrift Valley's Ling Han bit her lips and looked on with a conflicted expression. What did his choice represent? It meant that at this moment, this man was willing to abandon his life and the Human Emperor's inheritance in order to save Demoness G. Even if there was only a sliver of hope. As a woman, she felt a tinge of envy towards Demoness G from the bottom of her heart. Let go! Demoness G frowned deeply. Her eyelids were so heavy that she could not make out Su Zimo's face clearly, and her frail voice carried a hint of anxiousness. Don't feel guilty. The reason I saved you is because you saved me before as well. If not for you, I would have been killed by that damned monk long ago. I'm just repaying you right now. There was still no response. Let me go. It was still silent. However, Demoness G could sense him hugging her even closer. The both of them hovered in midair in a stalemate with the Human Emperor's Palace. The remaining few sealers were already on their way. The two of them were already at the end of the road with no strength to fight back. Even without releasing their powers as golden cores, the sealers could kill the two of them with just power at the level of Foundation Establishment Realm. Die! The first sealer to arrive was from Sword Sect. Buzz! The sound of a sword buzzing rang out and an unparalleled sword beam flashed. Instead of aiming for Su Zimo's vitals, it tried to sever his wrist. Su Zimo looked at that sword without moving. Given his current condition, any chi refinement warrior would be able to kill him, let alone the sealer of Sword Sect. Swash! The sword beam struck the column of light from the Human Emperor's Palace and created a ripple before vanishing instantly. Su Zimo was unharmed. The sealers were alarmed when they saw that. All of a sudden, as though it was agitated, that column of light shone brightly in a bedazzling manner. Countless beams of light shot forth and instantly penetrated the body of Sword Sect's sealer. Poof, poof, poof. Flashes of blood gushed out continuously. The sealer's body was punctured by the illusionary beams of light, and the next moment, he exploded into a blood mist without a corpse left. Upon seeing that, the remaining few sealers were shocked and terrified. Among them, Heavenly Dipper Sect's sealer had already released his secret skill, which struck the column of light. The column of light shook and shot forth countless beams once more, engulfing the sealer of Heavenly Dipper Sect. That person was rather impressive as a glint of determination flickered through his eyes. Roaring, he released his power as a golden core, wanting to fight against the light beams before him. Bang! He turned into a mist of blood and died on the spot. Although it was only a column of light beneath the human emperor's palace, its might could not be challenged, and it was enough to suppress everything, killing with a single touch. The others hurriedly stopped in their tracks and escaped, not daring to linger. They only came to a stop outside the boundaries of the human emperor's palace before turning back to look with fear in their hearts. The man and woman were still hovering in midair within that gigantic column of light, hugging together without separating. The sealers looked grim with indignant expressions. There was no way they could get their hands on the divine phoenix bone given the current situation. Let's wait a little more, there might still be a chance. After a moment, Hollow Monastery Sealer composed himself and said slowly with a shimmering gaze. That's right. Overlord Palace's Sealer said in a dark tone. He's only a mere Foundation establishment cultivator, and yet he dares to challenge the human emperor's palace? He's bound to fail. If this carries on, the both of them will definitely die. The few sealers nodded in agreement. If the two of them were dead, the human emperor's palace would either disappear or select a new successor. No matter the outcome, the successor of Divine Phoenix Island would lose the protection of the human emperor's palace. At that time, they would have the chance to sever his wrist and fight for the Divine Phoenix bone. Right now, all the sealers had to do was wait. Demoness G leaned in Su Zimo's embrace motionlessly, and it was unable to tell if she was dead. Su Zimo's aura was also getting increasingly weaker. Raising his head, he looked at the mysterious entrance of the human emperor's palace and narrowed his gaze with a resolute expression. It was as though he would never relent nor compromise. A long, long time later. Just as Su Zimo was gradually losing his consciousness, a change happened in midair. The two of them started rising slowly, as though they were pulled by something. In the blink of an eye, both of them entered the human emperor's palace and disappeared. There was a deathly silence. Upon seeing that, everyone was dumbfounded and even forgot to breathe. How is that possible? A long time later, Hollow Monastery Sealer murmured to himself with widened eyes and a lost expression. The human emperor's palace actually came to a compromise. Overlord Palace's Sealer chuckled bitterly. Since the human emperor's palace was sentient, it naturally possessed the intent of the human emperor. Throughout history, the human emperor had been the strongest emperor and was unparalleled. Since the human emperor's palace represented him, how could it bow down and relent? Furthermore, how could it do so for the sake of a mere Foundation establishment cultivator? If everyone had not seen it for themselves, none of them would have believed it. Was it pity? Or was there some other reason? Nobody knew. The entrance of the human emperor's palace closed. Bang! Boom! Boom! The ancient palace shook and dust fell endlessly as it rose into the air slowly, disappearing beyond the horizons of the heavens. The clouds dissipated and the thunderstorm subsided, spilling warm sunlight everywhere. The skies were clear once again. Yet, there was a murky fog in the hearts of all the sealers. Chapter 460 Historic Monster Incarnate. Chapter 460 Historic Monster Incarnate. The human emperor's palace had long disappeared. However, the Paragons who managed to survive and the sealers of the supersex looked in its direction for the longest time with conflicted expressions in silence. They felt an inexplicable sense of repression. That man should be dead, right? A long time later, Heavenly Dippersex Paragon asked hesitantly. Overlord Palace's Pang Yu nodded. He should be. After a moment, as though he was trying to convince himself, Pang Yu repeated with conviction, he must be. That's right, he's definitely dead. He's already so badly injured. Unless there's some divine method to resurrect the dead and regrow flesh, he's definitely dead for sure. That's right. The human emperor's palace only contains its inheritance. How could there be anything to save his life? Almost at the same time, the remaining Paragons heaved a sigh of relief, as if a burden was lifted off their shoulders. All of them looked at ease and smiled gently. The sealers present were expressionless as they exchanged glances. All of them could tell of the worry in the other's eyes. To old people like themselves who had lived for hundreds of years, the reactions and deductions of their juniors felt more like lies to make themselves feel better. Even they were unsure if the successor of Divine Phoenix Island was still alive. That was because nobody knew what was inside the human emperor's palace. It would be fine if the Divine Phoenix Island successor died in the human emperor's palace. If he survived and was reborn. Everything else aside, none of the Paragons who had entered the ancient battlefield this time round, Hang Qiuyu, Pang Yu, Monk Ju Chen and the others included, would be a match for that man. That was because all of those Paragons would be fearful. Subconsciously, all of them were hoping that the successor of Divine Phoenix Island would die, instead wishing for his survival so that they could fight him once more. In this battle, the Paragons of the immortal Buddhist and Fiend sects were defeated so badly that their confidence was destroyed. Clear Heart Nunnery Sela murmured, "The fact that they're able to produce such a paragon is a clear sign that the light of Providence is shining on them. Could this generation be the rise of Divine Phoenix Island once more? It's probably unsuitable to refer to him as a paragon anymore." That's right. Given his potential, bearing, guts and methods, he can be called a monster incarnate. Not just that, he's a rare monster incarnate throughout history. The few sealers were clear about how much of a stir it would cause once news of this spread to Tianhuang mainland. The entire cultivation world might be moved because of this. "It's all right," Hollow Monastery's sealer said calmly. "No matter how strong that lad is, he's only at Foundation Establishment realm. His future is still unknown. Given the firm foundations of our sects, we have rare monster incarnates as well." That's true. If he meets against the legacy disciples of our sects, he shouldn't have much of a chance of winning. Everyone conversed for a little more before separating. The battlefield was left with nothing but a pile of corpses, as though telling a tale of how tragic that battle was. A month later. Shentian City. The arrival of a piece of news caused a huge uproar. A monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island and this generation's pure maiden of the Fiend sects entered the human emperor's palace and their fates are unknown. Where did you get that news from? It's fake, right? Throughout history, the human emperor's palace has only allowed a single person in. How can both of them enter together? It's absolutely true. A senior brother of mine witnessed it personally. It's said that the corpses beneath the human emperor's palace can form a mountain and there are rivers of blood. More than half of the Paragons from the immortal Buddhist and Fiend sects are dead and some were crippled on the spot. How can that be? Aren't there sealers? The sealers died as well. I heard that at the end of it all, a few sealers tried joining hands to fight the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island and were even killed in return. Wow! What's the name of that person? Mad Blade. In a small little mansion with 2 stories within Elixir Yang sect, Tang Yu stood in front of a window. Her hands were behind her back and she frowned slightly in deep thought. The news of the human emperor's palace was truly shocking indeed. However, what she was more worried about was Su Zimo's situation. The strangest thing was that although she tried scouting for news from multiple sources, nothing returned, as though Su Zimo had vanished into thin air as nobody caught sight of him at all. At the side, Uncle Liang could read Tang Yu's mind and said with a smile, "Young master, you don't have to worry. Given Su Zimo's methods, even if he can't win, he can definitely escape alive." Yes. Tang Yu nodded. "I'm not worried about him, but I'm confused. Given his personality, since he chose to fight for the human emperor's palace's inheritance, how come there is no news at all? For certain people, their glamours can never be contained. Ever since he entered Shentian City, Su Zimo caused an earth-shaking change to the state of the entire place. The 4 mounted bandits were the first to be removed, followed by Poison Sect. Even powerful super sects with formidable foundations such as Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect were swept away by him. How could there be no news of a cultivator that was so aggressive and domineering? Uncle Liang, when I heard that the name of monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island was called Mad Blade, I even suspected that he's Su Zimo. Tang Yu said coldly. Both of them make use of sabers and have knowledge of the Sea Calming Manual. Furthermore, they are both at the Tsunami Blood Realm and are at 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment. That's impossible. Uncle Liang shook his head. Although both of them use sabers, Su Zimo has his perfect grade blood quencher while this monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island merely used a supreme grade spirit saber. Moreover, it's said that this person is extremely tall and bulky and is a burly man with a rough appearance. The two of them differ too much in terms of appearances. Tang Yu nodded. There was truly no way to explain it. Although they had their similarities, their differences were even more. Uncle Yang continued also, although Su Zimo is strong, he isn't at the state where he's able to take down the paragons of the immortal Buddhist and fiend sects, let alone a couple of sealers as well. Back then, in the Elixir Pool sect ruins, Su Zimo had to take a long time before baiting the sealer of Glass Palace to death. In terms of actual combat strength, Su Zimo was clearly far inferior. However, the monster Incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island fought against a couple of sealers and even killed them in return. The difference between them was too great. Tang Yu nodded. No matter what, I hope that fellow Taoist Su can return safely. At the entrance of the mansion, Su Xiaoning hugged her knees and sat on a stone step with a worried expression. There was a pitch-black demon beast beside her. A cold glint shimmered between its half-opened eyes. It was Night Spirit who was guarding Xiaoning. Heis. Sighing gently, Xiaoning murmured, all the cultivators in the city are discussing that monster Incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island and Mad Blade, but there's still no news of brother. I don't even know how he's doing right now. Growl. Night Spirit opened its eyes and yawned listlessly. Xiaoning frowned and asked, You're saying that brother is fine? How do you know that, brother? You've been with me the entire time and you haven't received any news either. Sitting up, Night Spirit extended its paw and gestured in a human-like manner while crying out repeatedly. Xiaoning's eyes widened. While others may not have understood, Xiaoning did. Her heart skipped a beat as she exclaimed, You mean to say that Mad Blade is? Night Spirit gestured with a shushing hand sign. Understanding, Xiaoning clutched her cherry lips immediately. Instantly, the worry on her face disappeared and she grinned, causing her eyes to look like crescent moons in a painting. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.